Hey guys, tonight we are heading out onto the high seas. But not for a treasure hunt or a swashbuckling adventure in the way you might imagine. We're going to explore the quiet, often overlooked reality of life aboard a pirate ship during the Golden Age. Think less sword fights, more incredibly awkward human resources management in a floating, lawless micro-society. We'll be looking at the world through the eyes of a pirate captain, navigating not just storms and naval patrols, but the complex, desperate, and deeply human dynamics of a crew cut off from the rest of the world. Let's just say, the romantic image painted by movies doesn't quite cover the sheer weirdness of it all. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps the channel find other people like you who enjoy drifting off to the strange corners of the past. Go ahead and drop a comment below with your city and what time it is for you. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The salt spray feels different on your face now. It's not the familiar sting you endured for years on that merchant vessel. A constant reminder of your low wages and the captain's heavy hand. This feels like a fresh start, a cleansing. You stand on the deck of your new home, a captured sloop renamed Liberty, and you breathe an air that smells of tar, rum, and a strange, unfamiliar hint of, well, freedom. You weren't born into this life. No one is. You chose it. Or maybe it chose you. You remember the life you left behind, not with fondness, but with a dull ache. The ender stays in the Royal Navy, where you were pressed into service, a polite term for being legally kidnapped off the street to fill a quota. You recall the weevils, crawling in the hardtack biscuits, so numerous that old sailors joked they were a source of fresh meat. You remember the foul, stagnant water, the back-breaking work, and the ever-present threat of the cat-o'-nine tails for the slightest infraction. A dropped rope, a moment of hesitation, and your back would be laid bare for a lashing that could cripple a man, or worse. The pay, when it finally came, was a pittance, often reduced by corrupt purse or S&D officers. That life was a cage, a perfectly legal, socially acceptable cage where your life was worth less than the cargo in the hold. Then you saw them. The black flag on the horizon. For your former crewmates, it was a sign of terror. For you, it was a job application. When the pirates boarded, you didn't fight. You watched. You saw men who looked like you, weather-beaten, calloused, but with a fire in their eyes you hadn't seen before. They moved with a purpose that wasn't born of fear, but of shared enterprise. They offered you a choice: join them or be set adrift. For you, it wasn't a choice at all. This is the story of so many who turned to piracy. The mainstream historical view is that the golden age of piracy from roughly 1690 to 1725 wasn't just a random crime wave. It was a direct consequence of the brutal conditions in national navies and the merchant marine. Thousands of experienced sailors found themselves unemployed and desperate after major European wars, like the War of the Spanish Succession, ended. Piracy wasn't just the most profitable option for many, it was the only option that offered a semblance of dignity. On this new ship, the rules are different. You've seen the articles, the pirate code that everyone, including the captain, has to sign. It guarantees every man an equal vote in major decisions and a set share of the plunder. This is revolutionary. Back on the naval ship, the captain was a god. Here, he's more like an elected official, one who can be voted out of office if he proves incompetent or tyrannical. And here's a little detail you wouldn't expect: the food is better. Pirates, when they captured a vessel, often prioritized stocking up on fresh livestock, vegetables, and quality spirits. While a Royal Navy sailor was chewing on maggot-white bread, you might be dining on fresh turtle meat or barbecued pork. It's a small thing, but it's everything. It's a sign that, on this ship, you are a shareholder, not just human cargo. Of course, it's not a paradise. You've simply traded one set of dangers for another, but the choice was yours. You look around at the faces of your new brethren, a motley collection of runaways, ex-soldiers, and escaped servants from every corner of the Atlantic. You are all fugitives from a world that had no place for you, but was this a conscious act of rebellion? Were you and your shipmates social revolutionaries, creating a democratic, multi-ethnic society on the waves, or were you just desperate men taking the most direct path to wealth? You could find historians are still arguing about that. Some see pirates as nothing more than violent thieves, while others view them as pioneers of a kind of floating, alternative society, a hierarchy rebelling against the tyranny of kings and capitalists. You don't have an answer. All you know is that the land, with its laws, its hierarchies, and its endless toil for someone else's profit, is behind you. Ahead is the vast, open, and lawless ocean, and for the first time in a long time, you feel like you can breathe. Your world has shrunk to the length and breadth of this wooden vessel. It's about 70 feet long, maybe 20 feet wide. That's it. This is your nation, your city, your home, all contained within the curved ribs of oak and pine. You learn its language quickly, the groan of the mast in a heavy wind, the rhythmic slap of waves against the hull, the sharp crack of a sail catching a gust. These sounds replace the church bells and market cries you left behind on land. The rhythm of your life is no longer dictated by the sun rising over a town square, but by the turning of the hourglass that marks the change of the watch. This ship, your new home, is a captured merchant sloop. It's not a massive, intimidating warship. In fact, that's the point. The mainstream historical consensus is that pirates overwhelmingly preferred smaller, faster, more agile ships like sloops and schooners. Why? Because your business isn't about fighting naval fleets in pitched battles, it's about commerce raiding. You need to be fast enough to chase down a lumbering merchantman and nimble enough to escape a Royal Navy frigate that might come investigating. You also need a shallow draft, allowing you to hide in shallow bays and river mouths where the big naval ships can't follow. This ship is a tool perfectly suited for its job. You and the crew have already made modifications. The carpenter and his mates have been busy knocking down some of the bulkheads and partitions in the hold. On a merchant ship, those walls created separate cargo areas. On a pirate ship, you need open space for a larger crew. You have nearly 100 men on a vessel designed for 20 and for extra cannons. Privacy is the first luxury to be thrown overboard. You sleep in hammocks slung inches apart, a gently swaying forest of snoring, muttering men. There are no private cabins, save for a small one for the captain, and even that is more of an office and chart room than a personal sanctuary. You get used to the smell. It's a unique, potent cocktail that you'll forever associate with this life. There's the sharp, clean scent of salt water and the pervasive, comforting smell of Stockholm to use to waterproof the rigging and hull. But layered underneath are the less romantic aromas, the damp, musty odor of the bilge water sloshing in the ship's belly, the sour tang of sweat from 100 unwashed bodies packed into a confined space, the faint, earthy smell of the chickens and the occasional goat kept in a pen on deck for fresh food, and of course the ever-present, sweet and sticky scent of spilled rum. And then there's the sanitation, or lack thereof. You learn where the head is. It's not a room, but a small, grated platform extending from the bow, ahead of the foremost sail. You perch out over the open ocean, with the sea spray providing a rather aggressive form of bite it. It's cold, wet, and incredibly public. This is a tiny detail, but it speaks volumes about the life. All pretense of modesty is stripped away. You are living a life reduced to its barest essentials: work, eat, sleep, and survive, all in plain sight of your comrades. In this cramped, floating world, you are never alone, but you are profoundly isolated. Weeks can go by without seeing another sail, let alone land. The world beyond the horizon ceases to feel real. England, France, Spain, they become abstract concepts, distant sources of the ships you hunt and the laws you defy. Your entire social universe is right here, contained in this wooden shell. This isolation is a pressure cooker. It forges intense bonds of brotherhood and loyalty, but it also breeds paranoia, friction, and conflict. A stolen ration, a perceived insult, a disagreement over a card game, these small slights can fester and erupt into violence in a way they never would on land, where you could simply walk away. This is the core of your new existence. You've left the complex web of terrestrial society for a new one, seemingly simpler but far more intense. Some historians argue that this was the entire point. They debate whether pirates consciously viewed their ships as a kind of mobile, self-contained republic, a direct challenge to the nation-states they had abandoned, Was calling your ship the Liberty or the Royal Fortune an ironic jab at the king just for show, or was it a declaration of principles? The truth is likely somewhere in the middle. For some, it was a profound political statement. For others, it was just a job. You don't spend your days philosophizing about it. You're too busy learning the ropes, literally. You learn to read the weather in the clouds, to navigate by the stars, to handle a sail in a rising gale. You are becoming a part of the ship, another working component in this complex, living machine. And you realize that on this vessel, a man's worth isn't tied to his birth or his accent, but to his skill and his willingness to work. This meritocracy is intoxicating, and it's this system that will give you the chance to rise. You weren't chosen to be captain. You earned it. This isn't the Royal Navy, where a captaincy is bought or bestowed upon a nobleman's second son. Here, leadership is a performance, and the crew is the audience. You rise through the ranks by being undeniably good at your job, whatever that may be. At first, you were just another hand. You learn it to scramble up the rigging in a storm. Your fingers numb, the wind trying to rip you from the ropes. You learn it how to aim a cannon on a rolling deck, a chaotic ballet of timing and physics, where a split-second mistake could send a cannonball skipping harmlessly over the waves, or worse, send the cannon itself careening across the deck. You learn it the brutal, intimate business of a boarding action, the roar of pistols, the clash of steel, the desperate, close-quarters struggle for control. In these moments, men are watching. They see who keeps their head, who can issue a clear order in the midst of chaos, who fights with courage but not recklessness. Your reputation is built in these small, violent increments. You share your rum ration freely. You're fair in disputes. You stand your watch without complaint. You become known as a reliable man, a prime seaman. The previous captain, a man named Finch, was a good fighter but a poor navigator. He was bold, but his boldness led you into a fruitless, week-long chase that burned through precious supplies and left the crew grumbling. After you narrowly escaped a naval patrol, thanks to a squall and some blind luck, the mood on the ship soured. That's when the quartermaster, a steady man named Evans, approached you. The quartermaster is a fascinating and uniquely pirate institution. Most people think the captain is the absolute ruler, but that's a misconception based on naval tradition. On a pirate ship, power is divided. The captain holds absolute command during a battle or a chase in times of action. His word is law. But in the day-to-day running of the ship, it's the quartermaster who holds the power. HES elected by the crew and acts as their representative. He distributes rations, maintains order, and settles disputes. He is the voice of the crew, the check on the captain's authority. Evans tells you what you already know: the men have lost faith in Finch. They respect his courage but doubt his judgment. They want to call a vote. According to the articles, any man can call for a new election of captain at any time, a radical form of democracy. Evans says the men are talking about you. They saw you argued for a different course, a more promising shipping lane a week prior. They saw you take charge of the forward gun crew during the last skirmish. They want you to stand for the captaincy. The election is a simple affair. It happens on the main deck. Finch is formally deposed. There's no ceremony, just a quiet statement from the quartermaster that the crew wishes to reconsider its leadership. Finch, knowing he has lost the room, doesn't fight it. HES seen it happen before. Fighting it would be a death sentence. He simply nods and steps back into the ranks. He'll get his share of the next prize like any other man. A strange and humbling transition from commander to common sailor, in the span of an hour. Then the quartermaster puts your name forward. Another name is proposed, a burly sailmaker named Cobb. You each say a few words. You don't make grand promises of treasure. Instead, you talk about practical things: a plan to careen the ship and clean the hull to improve her speed, a strategy for hunting along the coast of the Carolinas where merchant traffic is heavy. You talk sense. Cobb makes promises of Spanish gold and easy fights. The vote is a simple show of hands or a walk by, where each man walks past the candidate he supports. The count is clear. You are the new captain. There is no crown, no scepter. Your symbol of office is the slightly battered spyglass handed to you by the quartermaster, and the right to the small cabinet's turn. Your authority is real, but it's conditional. You hold it only as long as you have the crew's confidence. This is the central bargain of pirate command. Some historians see this pirate democracy as a direct import from the traditions of privating, where crews had more say than in the Navy. Others argue it was a spontaneous creation, a logical response to the need for cooperation in a high-risk enterprise. Was this a genuine political experiment, or just a pragmatic way to keep a ship full of armed, volatile men from tearing itself apart? The academic debate on the origins of pirate democracy is surprisingly lively. One of the oddest, most debated potential aspects of this power dynamic is what happened to deposed captains. While many, like Finch, were simply demoted and reabsorbed into the crew, some accounts suggest a far more final outcome. The idea of marooning, leaving a man on a deserted island with a flask of water, a pistol, and a single shot is a staple of pirate lore. But how often did it really happen? Especially to a former captain, some scholars believe it was a common punishment for tyranny or cowardice, a way of removing a problem without the messiness of an onboard execution. Others think it was exceptionally rare, a dramatic punishment reserved for the most extreme cases of betrayal. As you take the helm for the first time as captain, you feel the weight of 100 men's hopes and livelihoods on your shoulders. You have their respect for now, but you know that the same hands that raised you up can just as easily pull you down. Your command is a lease, not a deed, and the rent is paid daily in competence and success. Your first act as captain isn't to chart a course for treasure. It's to reaffirm the law. You gather the entire crew on the main deck, not in the sweltering heat of midday, but in the cool of the late afternoon when the work is done. The quartermaster stands beside you, holding the ship's articles. He unrolls the rough piece of sailcloth, its surface covered in crude but clear handwriting, with every man's mark or signature at the bottom. This document, the Pirate Code, is the constitution of your floating republic. It's what separates you from a pack of floating thugs. It is a social contract, and every man present agreed to it when he joined the crew. The quartermaster reads the articles aloud, his voice carrying over the gentle creak of the ship. The ritual is important. It's a reminder that the rules apply to everyone, including you. The code covers the fundamentals of your enterprise. The first articles are always about shares. A regular seaman gets 1 share. A skilled craftsman like the carpenter or the cooper might get a share and a quarter. The quartermaster and the captain typically receive a share and a half, or perhaps 2 shares. The key here is the ratio. The difference between the highest and lowest paid man on your ship is tiny, perhaps 2-to-1. The captain and officers could earn 100 times more than a common sailor. This radically flat pay structure is the economic bedrock of pirate society, a core reason men chose this life. Next are the rules of conduct. No fighting amongst yourselves on board. The quartermaster reads, all quarrels to be settled on shore with sword and pistol. This is a brilliant piece of practical management. It doesn't outlaw conflict, which would be impossible, but it defers it. It prevents a minor squabble from turning the deck into a slaughterhouse. You can hate a man for weeks at sea, but you have to wait until you make landfall to duel it out. Then comes the article on desertion. If a man deserts the ship or his post in battle, the punishment is stark marooning or death. There is no ambiguity here. Your survival depends on mutual reliance. A single man failing in his duty can doom everyone. And then you get to the more complex articles, the ones that touch on the tangled mess of human behavior. The code addresses theft. Stealing from a fellow crewmate is one of the gravest sins. If a man is found stealing from another, he'll often have his nose and ears slit, and then be set ashore somewhere inhospitable, a marked man for life. This fierce protection of personal property seems ironic for a ship of thieves, but it's essential. When you have nothing but what you can carry, trust in your immediate neighbors is paramount. Now, we get to a particularly tricky part of many pirate codes, and one historians love to discuss. An article often reads something like this: no boy or woman to be allowed amongst us. If any man be found seducing any of the latter sex, and carrying her to sea, disguised, he is to suffer death. On its face, this seems like a straightforward rule to prevent distractions and conflict. Bringing a woman into this hyper-masculine, high-stress environment would be like tossing a lit match into a powder keg. But the reality of how this rule was applied is where things get murky. This is a point of significant historical debate. Did this rule truly protect captured women, or was it merely a pragmatic rule to maintain order among the pirates themselves when pirates captured a vessel with female passengers? The fate of those women varied wildly. Some accounts, like those from the famous pirates Bartholomew Black Barteret or John Phillips, show their codes explicitly offered a degree of protection, but many other accounts, often from the testimony of captured sailors, paint a much grimmer picture. The rule was often ignored, and women weren't treated as part of the plunder. The law, you see, is only as strong as the will to enforce it. As you stand there, listening to the familiar words, you know this code is not a perfect shield. It's a framework, a set of ideals. You as captain, and the quartermaster as the crew's representative, are the ones who must interpret and enforce it. What do you do when a popular, skilled sailor gets caught stealing a small item from a disliked, lazy one? Do you apply the letter of the laundress alienating a key man? What happens when you capture a ship, and the crew, drunk on victory and drum, start signing the female passengers? Your authority, your leadership, and maybe your life, will depend on how you navigate these moments. Here's a bizarre little tidbit about these codes. Some included workmen's compensation. Seriously, an article would lay out a specific payment from the common stock for injuries sustained in the line of duty. For the loss of a right arm, you might get 600 pieces of 8. A left arm, 500th. An eye or a finger, 100th. It was a crude insurance policy, but it was more than any legitimate navy or merchant company offered. It acknowledged that a man's body was his livelihood, and if he sacrificed a piece of it for the good of the crew, he would be compensated. It's another example of the strangely professional and pragmatic nature of the pirate enterprise. The reading finishes. A cask of rum is opened. Every man takes a cup and reaffirms his oath. The articles are rolled up and stored safely by the quartermaster. The law has been re-established, but you know the truth. The code provides the map, but it's you who has to steer the ship through the messy, unpredictable waters of human nature. The sun beats down on the endless, shimmering blue. It's been 3 weeks since you saw land, and a dull, quiet monotony has settled over the ship. The initial thrill of your captaincy has faded into the relentless routine of sea life. This is the part they don't show in the stories: the waiting, the immense, soul-crushing boredom of it all. Your crew is 100 men. 100 men from different countries, speaking different languages, all crammed together in this floating tinderbox. You have English, Irish, and Scots, of course, but you also have Frenchmen, Dutchmen, Swedes, freed African slaves, and even a few Native Americans. The pirate ship was one of the most multicultural places on Earth in the 18th century. On a naval or merchant ship, national and racial tensions were rife. Here, they are muted. A man's ability to handle a sail or a cutlass matters more than the god he prays to or the color of his skin. This practical meritocracy is a well-documented fact of pirate life. But 100 men, no matter how skilled, are still 100 men. They need to be occupied. An idle crew is a dangerous screw. Grudges form, old wounds are remembered, and small irritations grow into major conflicts. Your job as captain during these long, quiet stretches is less about command and more about managing a floating asylum. Music is a lifeline. You have a fiddler on board, a one-eyed man from Cork, and when he plays, the mood of the entire ship can lift. Men gather to listen, to dance clumsy, stomping jigs on the deck, to sing sea shanties and body songs. It's a moment of shared culture, a release valve for the pressure that builds day by day. Gambling is another pastime, though it's a risky one. Most pirate articles, including yours, forbid gambling with money. A man could lose his entire future share of plunder in a single night of cards or dice, creating desperation and resentment. So the men gamble for other things: their ration of rum, their share of tobacco, chores on the ship. You turn a blind eye to it, as long as it doesn't lead to violence. It's a necessary evil. Then there is the storytelling. In a world without books, a man who can spin a good yarn is a valuable commodity. After the evening meal, men will gather on the forecastle to listen to tales of ghost ships, mermaids, and legendary pirates of the past. They tell exaggerated stories of their own exploits, each retelling making them bolder and more successful. This isn't just entertainment, it's how you build a shared mythology. That underneath it all, there is a profound loneliness. You are surrounded by people, yet you are in a world devoid of the familiar comforts of society. There are no women, no children, no families. This single-gender environment creates a strange social dynamic. The bonds between men are intensified. Friendships are forged with a fierce loyalty that is almost familial. You see men who will share everything, who will literally die for each other. But this environment also leads to a coarsening of manners and a constant, low-level tension. The casual violence, the lack of any sort of feminine influence, it changes a man. You see it in yourself. You find yourself thinking less of the world you left behind. The faces of your family, if you had one, are starting to fade. Your memories of land are becoming muted, like a watercolor left out in the rain. Historians often talk about the psychological impact of this isolation. Did this all-male environment contribute to the pirates' legendary ferocity? Some sociologists and historians argue that these total institutions, as they're called, prisons, barracks, and in this case, pirate ships, foster a unique culture where traditional social norms are inverted. Aggression and toughness become the most prized virtues. One of the more peculiar and less discussed aspects of this life is the role of pets. Many pirates kept animals on board, and not just for food. Parrots are the famous example, and they were indeed popular because they were exotic, intelligent, and could be taught to talk, providing endless amusement. But cats were even more common and far more practical, essential for controlling the rat population. And many pirates kept dogs or even monkeys, captured from other ships. These animals provided a source of companionship, an outlet for affection in a world where showing such softness to another man might be seen as a weakness. A pirate might be the most feared man on the Spanish Main, but he would still gently scratch his dog behind the ears. You look out at the crew. They are mending sails, carving wood, sharpening their weapons. They are busy, but in the quiet moments, you see the same look in their eyes that you feel in your own heart, a deep, abiding loneliness. You are all fugitives, adrift on a vast and empty sea, with only each other for company. The treasure you seek is not just gold and silver. It is a release from this crushing, silent solitude. And you know, as the sun begins to set, that the only way to find that release is through the chaos and violence of taking another ship. The boredom, you realize, is a more dangerous enemy than the Royal Navy. Your authority as captain is a strange and contradictory thing. During a chase or a battle, it is absolute, unquestionable. You can order a man to his death, and he will go. A moment's hesitation from the crew can mean the difference between a captured prize and the bottom of the ocean. In the heat of the moment, democracy is a luxury you cannot afford. You shout orders, and they are obeyed instantly. The ship functions as an extension of your will, every man a nerve, every sail a muscle, all responding to your command. But the moment the action is over, that absolute power evaporates. You are once again an elected official subject to the mood of the electorate. This duality is the essence of your command. You are both a dictator and a public servant, and you must know which role to play at any given time. This power extends to all aspects of life on board, even the most personal. You, along with the quartermaster, are the ultimate arbiter of disputes. When two men have a grievance, they come to you. Use it on a coil of rope on the quarterdeck, the two angry sailors standing before you, and you listen. It's not a formal court, but it serves the same purpose. You must be seen as fair, even-handed, and wise. Your judgment in these small matters, your authority for the big ones. This authority puts you in a position of immense influence over the lives of your men. You decide the course of the ship, which means you decide who they will fight, what risks they will take, and ultimately, their chances of survival and enrichment. This is the accepted, formal power of your office. But there is another, murkier layer of power that you possess. In this isolated, all-male world, where the normal structures of society are gone, new hierarchies form. As the most powerful man on the ship, you are at the top of this new hierarchy. Your favor can make a man's life easier, Your displeasure can make it a living hell. A kind word from you can elevate a sailor in the eyes of his peers. A public rebuke can shatter his standing. This is where the line between leadership and tyranny can become dangerously thin. There are no external checks on your power. No king, no admiral, no magistrate is looking over your shoulder. There is only the crew, and a crew can be manipulated. A successful captain, one who brings in prize after prize, can build up such a reserve of goodwill and fear that his authority starts to look a lot like the tyranny you all sought to escape. The historical record is full of examples. Edward Blackbird Teach was a master of this. He cultivated a terrifying image, braiding lit fuses into his massive black beard during battle to wreath his head in smoke. He was theatrical, intimidating, and exceptionally successful. His crew was famously loyal, not because he was fair, but because he was powerful and made them rich. He ruled by fear and charisma, and his crew, it seems, was more than happy with the arrangement. This leads us to a darker, less discussed aspect of the captain's power. In an environment with no legal oversight and a stark power imbalance, the potential for coercion and abuse is ever present. While the pirate code might provide a framework for justice, it can regulate every interaction. A captain's will, especially a feared captain like Blackbird, could be enforced through subtle threats, intimidation, and the promise of reward or ruin. Historians tread carefully here, as direct evidence is scarce and often comes from biased sources, like trial records or sensationalized histories published at the time. The question of sexual coercion is particularly difficult to address. Did captains use their power to force themselves on younger or less powerful crew members? The code might forbid it, but on a ship in the middle of the ocean, the only law that truly matters is the law of power. This is a point of ongoing, unsensitive academic debate. Some historians argue that the democratic nature of pirate society in the presence of the quartermaster would have made such abuses difficult and rare. A captain who engaged in such behavior would risk being deposed and punished. Others suggest that in the brutal reality of 18th century life, such abuses of power were likely common, both on pirate ships and in the legitimate navies, but were simply not recorded. The stories of those who suffered would have been lost to the sea. One of the strangest assertions about a captain's authority comes from the trial of Calico Jack Rackham's crew. It was during this trial that two of his most effective male pirates were revealed to be women, and Bonnie and Mary Red. The fact that they could live and fight as pirates for so long disguised as men is a fascinating story in itself. But what it says about the captain's power is also interesting. Did Calico Jack know? The popular story is that he did, and he kept their secret. This implies a captain could bend even the most fundamental rule: no women on board if he chose to, as long as he could maintain the support of his crew. As captain, you are constantly walking this tightrope. You must be a leader, a judge, a strategist, and at times a tyrant. You must project an aura of unshakable confidence, even when you are racked with doubt. You have the power of life and death, of reward and punishment. But it's a power granted to you by the very men you rule. They are your subjects, your jury, and your potential executioners all at once. And every day you have to earn the right to stay at the top. The ship is running low on water, and the mood is getting ugly. The barrels of fresh water taken from the last prize are nearly empty, and wits left is brackish and slimy. Tempers are short. A fight broke out this morning over a game of cards, and you had the two men separated, promising them a chance to settle it on the next shore, as the code dictates. But you know that's not enough. You need to reassert control. You need to make an example. This is where discipline comes in, and pirate discipline is a strange mix of democratic justice and brutal, swift punishment. For minor infractions, laziness on watch, petty arguments, being drunk when you're supposed to be on duty, the quartermaster usually handles it. The punishment might be a temporary loss of rum rations, extra chores, or simple public shaming. But for serious offenses, it falls to you as captain to preside over the judgment. And it's not always about the code. Sometimes, it's about maintaining the intangible thing that is good order and discipline. Your target is a sailor named Silas, a grumbler and unknown troublemaker. He hasn't broken a major rule in the articles, but his constant complaining is poisoning the crew's morale. HES a slow-motion mutiny, and you need to stop him. You find your reason when Silas is caught sleeping on his lookout watch. It's a serious offense. A sleeping lookout could miss a prize, or, worse, a naval vessel dooming you all. According to the code, the punishment is at the discretion of the captain and the majority of the crew. You convene a captain's master gathering of the whole crew on the main deck. Silas is brought forward. The quartermaster states the offense. You ask Silas if he has anything to say. He mutters an excuse about being tired. You let the silence hang in the air for a moment. Then you turn to the crew. He put us all at risk, you say, your voice calm and even. For a moment of comfort, he was willing to gamble with every life on this ship. What say you? The crew, already on edge from the water shortage in the weeks of boredom, is in no mood for mercy. They shout their agreement. They want him punished. You have your mandate. The punishment you choose is ducking from the yard arm. It's a classic naval punishment that pirates adopted. Silas is stripped to his trousers, his hands tied. A rope is tied around his waist and slung over the end of the main yard arm, the large spar that holds the mainsail. HES hauled up, dangling over the water. Then, the rope is released, and he plunges into the ocean. Before he can round, HES hauled back up, gasping and sputtering, only to be dropped again. You do it 3 times, but it's terrifying, humiliating, and deeply unpleasant. When Silas is finally brought back on deck, shivering undefeated, the message to the crew is clear. Incompetence will not be tolerated. The safety of the ship comes first. You have reinforced your authority without having to resort to the extremes of flogging or execution. This is the careful balance you must maintain. But what happens when that balance is lost? What happens when a captain's discipline slides into outright sadism? This is where the dark side of pirate life emerges. The historical record contains chilling accounts of captains who ruled not through respect, but through pure terror. Edward Lowe was infamous for his cruelty. He was a man who seemed to take genuine pleasure in inflicting pain. His crew was complicit, either through fear or because they shared his sadistic tendencies. Accounts from captured sailors describe Lowe cutting off prisoners' ears and lips, roasting them, and forcing other prisoners to eat them. This wasn't discipline, it was psychopathy. Why did his crew tolerate it? Historians still debate this. Perhaps his sheer brutality kept them in line, or maybe his successful raids and the riches they brought were enough to make them overlook his monstrous behavior. This raises a disturbing question: did the pirate life attract psychopaths, or did it create them? There's an ongoing academic discussion about the nature of violence on pirate ships. Was it purely instrumental, a tool to achieve a goal, like forcing a captured ship to surrender quickly, or was it often recreational, a form of entertainment in a brutal and boring world? The case of a captain like Edward Lowe suggests the latter. A less gruesome but equally telling punishment was keel hauling, though its actual practice is hotly debated by maritime historians. The idea is simple and horrific. A sailor is tied to a rope that passes under the ship. HES thrown overboard on one side, and the crew pulls the rope, dragging him under the keel, the ship's spine, to the other side. The hull of a ship is covered in sharp barnacles and splinters. A man subjected to keel hauling would be scraped, flayed, unlikely drowned. While it's a staple of pirate lore, some historians argue there are very few reliable, first-hand accounts of it ever happening on a pirate vessel. It may have been more of a threat, a naval legend that pirates were happy to let others believe they practiced. You look at the humbled Silas, now wrapped in a blanket and being given a cup of rum by one of his mates. You didn't need to cut off his ears or keel haul him. You used just enough violence to make your point. You reinforced the line between order and chaos. But you are keenly aware of how easy it would be to cross that line. In this world with no external laws, the only thing stopping you from becoming a monster like Edward Lowe is your own conscience, and the collective will of 100 thirsty, desperate men. The wind has died. The sails hang limp and useless. The ship, your little kingdom, is becalmed, motionless under a white-hot sun. The sea is a vast, blue mirror, and you've been staring at your own reflection for 3 days. This is when the whispers start. Your power as captain may seem secure after you discipline Silas, But authority on a pirate ship is like the wind itself, it can change direction without warning. You are not a king. You have no divine right to rule. The whispers begin in the shadows of the forecastle, in the cramped, stinking darkness of the sleeping deck. They are quiet at first, just murmurs of discontent. Finch would have read the weather better, someone might say. He wouldn't have brought us into this doldrum. It's a reference to the former captain you deposed, a subtle reminder that leadership is temporary. You see the small signs. The quartermaster Evans, who is supposed to be your partner in command, seems a little distant. He answers your questions with clipped, formal responses. HES, the pulse of the crew. If HES pulling away, it means the crew is too. You see men gathering in small groups, their conversations stopping abruptly when you approach. You see Cobb, the sailmaker who ran against you for the captaincy, sharing a joke with a group of sailors, and they all look in your direction. This is the ever-present threat of a mutiny, not a violent, bloody uprising, but a slow, quiet erosion of your authority. Pirate mutinies were often not about cutlasses and pistols, but about consensus. If the majority of the crew decides you are no longer the right man for the job, you are out. It can be as simple as that. The challenge to your authority often comes from a rival, someone who thinks they can do a better job. In your case, it's Cobb. HES a strong, experienced seaman, and he has a faction of supporters. He doesn't need to challenge you directly. He just needs to be there, a viable alternative, while you fail. He can undermine you with a well-timed scoff, a skeptical glance at your charts, a confident statement about what he would do differently. This internal political struggle is a core, and often overlooked, part of pirate life. We have this image of a unified band of brothers, but a pirate ship was a hotbed of ambition, jealousy, and shifting alliances. The most famous example of a pirate captain being overthrown is probably Henry Morgan. Although he was technically a privateer, his methods were pure pirate. After his wildly successful raid on Panama, his crew accused him of cheating them out of their fair share of the loot. He woke up one morning to find most of his fleet, and his men had deserted him during the night, a quiet mutiny on a massive scale. He was left with only his own ship and a handful of loyalists. So how do you handle this? You can't show weakness. You can't appear paranoid or defensive. That would only confirm their doubts. You must project an aura of complete control, even as you feel it slipping through your fingers. You spend more time on deck, being visible. You talk to the men, not as their commander, but as a fellow sailor. You ask the cook about his supplies, the carpenter about the state of the longboat. You show them you are engaged, that you are on top of every detail, and you watch Cobb. You keep him close. You assign him to a difficult but important task, like reorganizing the storage of the cannonballs in the hold. It's a public show of trust, but it also keeps him busy and under your direct supervision. The nature of pirate leadership and mutiny is a subject of endless fascination for historians. One of the more peculiar debates revolves around the symbols of power. On a naval vessel, the captain's cabin, his uniform, and the formal salutes he received all reinforced his authority. Pirates rejected most of this, but they had their own symbols. The captain often had a slightly better coat, a finer pistol, or like you, a superior spyglass. These weren't just perks, they were markers of his position. An interesting question historians ask is when a captain was deposed, what happened to these items? Did he keep them? Or were they passed on to the new captain like a crown? The general consensus is that these tools of the trade belonged to the office, not the man. When you were out, your fancy spyglass went to the next guy. A little-known fact that highlights the precarious nature of pirate command comes from the story of Captain Howell Davis. He was a clever, charismatic captain, but he was killed during an attempt to capture the governor of a Portuguese island. The moment he fell, his crew didn't panic or flee. According to the account of one of his men, a then unknown pirate named Bartholomew Roberts, they immediately rowed back to the ship, went to the main deck, and held an election for a new captain right then and there. Business had to continue. Leadership was a role that needed to be filled, and if the man filling it was gone, they simply appointed a new one. As the third day of being become draws to a close, you feel the pressure mounting. The whispers are getting louder. Cobb is looking more confident. You stare at the flat calm water, praying for a ripple, for a breath of wind that will not only move the ship, but will also save your command. Your fate doesn't rest on a battle or a prize. It rests on the weather and on the fickle, shifting loyalties of 100 desperate men. Just as the tension on board feels like it's about to snap, a dark line appears on the horizon. A breeze, cool and steady, begins to ripple across the glassy water. The sails, limp for so long, flutter and then snap full. The ship groans and begins to move. A collective sigh of relief rolls through the crew. The whispers against you die down, replaced by the familiar, comforting sounds of a ship underway. Your command is safe, for now. With the crisis averted, the ship's social life settles back into its rhythm. It's in this calm that you start to pay more attention to the specific relationships between your men. You notice the sailors in particular, a grizzled old gunner named O'Malley and a young man he took under his wing, a new recruit named Finn. They are inseparable. They share their rations, mend each other's clothes, and stand watch together. They function as a single unit. You've seen this before, but you learn there's a formal name for it: Matelotage. This is one of the most fascinating undebated social institutions in the pirate world. Matelotage was a formal, contractual partnership between two male pirates. It was a kind of civil union, a brotherhood recognized by the entire crew. The two men would agree to become matelots, a French word that simply means seaman or bunk mate. They would pool their resources, combine their plunder, and fight side by side. The practice likely originated with the buccaneers on Hispaniola and Tortuga in the 17th century. These were rugged hunters living far from civilization, who relied on each other for survival. They formed partnerships to hunt wild boar and cattle, sharing everything from their huts to their equipment. When these buccaneers took to the sea and became pirates, they brought this tradition with them. You see it all over your ship. It's not just O'Malley and Finn. There are several other pairs of matelots on board. It's a stabilizing force. These pairs are a reliable social unit, less likely to cause trouble, more focused on their shared success. When one man in a partnership gets a share of the plunder, it benefits them both. The quartermaster Evans explains the formal aspects to you one evening. A Matelotage agreement was often written down and added to the ship's articles, or at least witnessed by the quartermaster. The core of the contract was economic. The most important clause was that the two matelots would name each other as their sole heir. If O'Malley were to be killed in battle, his share of the plunder, both current and future, would go directly to Finn. It wouldn't be absorbed back into the common stock. This was a huge deal. It was a form of life insurance in the most dangerous profession on Earth. For a young pirate with no family, or a man who had fled his family, this meant that his efforts wouldn't be in vain. His wealth, however ill-gotten, would go to the one person in the world he cared about. It also meant that if a pirate was maimed and couldn't work, his partner would be obligated to care for him. It was a private social safety net. Now, here's where it gets complicated, and where historians have been arguing for decades. What was the nature of these relationships? Were they purely economic and social partnerships? A form of brotherly love forged in the crucible of a dangerous, all-male environment, or were they, at least some of the time, romantic and sexual relationships? The historical evidence is tantalizingly vague. The documents Pirate Arts talk about the economic and social aspects of matelotage, the sharing of property and the mutual support. They rarely, if ever, explicitly mention a sexual component. But this is hardly surprising. In the 17th and 18th centuries, such things were simply not written about, and if they were, it was in the context of condemnation and criminality. Some historians argue strongly that we should not impose modern categories of sexual identity on the past. They contend that these were deep, platonic friendships, and to view them through a sexual lens is anachronistic. They point out that intense, emotionally expressive friendships between men were common in this era. Other historians, however, argue that it is naive to assume that in an all-male society, isolated for months or even years, that these intense, domestic partnerships did not have a sexual dimension. They suggest that at least some of these matelotage unions were the 18th century pirate equivalent of a same-sex marriage. The lack of explicit evidence, they argue, is not evidence, they argue, is not evidence of absence. A strange and often cited piece of circumstantial evidence comes from the buccaneer Alexander X. Mellon, whose 1678 book The Buccaneers of America is one of our best sources on the early days of piracy. He described Matelotage and noted that these partners shared all that they have in common and that if one died, the other inherited all his goods. He doesn't mention sex, but his description of the intensity and domesticity of the bond has led many to read between the lines. As you observe O'Malley and Finn, you see a relationship that defies easy categorization. You see the practicality O'Malley's experience protects Finn, and Finn's youthful energy assists O'Malley. You see the deep affection, the easy camaraderie, the way they look out for each other without a word. Is it a father-son bond, a deep friendship, a romantic partnership? Maybe it's all of those things at once. On a pirate ship, far from the rigid social rules of land, relationships could be as fluid and unchartable as the sea itself. You realize that what you are witnessing is simply a form of family, created out of necessity and choice, in a world that had stripped these men of everything else. The practical, economic side of Matelotage becomes starkly clear when the carpenter, a quiet Dutchman named Van Houten, takes a bad fall during a storm. The ship lurches unexpectedly, and he tumbles down a ladder into the hold, his leg twisting beneath him at a sickening angle. The crack of the bone is audible even over the howl of the wind. He has a mate lot, a sailmaker named Jean-Luc. The moment Van Houten cries out, Jean-Luc is there, pushing through the concerned crew to get to his partner's side. The ship's surgeon, a man who was a barber on land and whose medical knowledge is questionable at best, does what he can. He forces the bone back into place and binds the leg with splints, but it's a bad break. Van Houten will not be walking, let alone working, for months. On a merchant or naval vessel, a man with an injury this severe would be a liability. He would be seen as a useless mouth to feed. His pay would be stopped. He would likely be put ashore at the next port, regardless of how hostile or unfamiliar it might be, and left to fend for himself. His career, and possibly his life, would be over. But on your ship, things are different. First, the articles provide for him. You gather with the quartermaster to consult the code. It's right there. In black and white, Van Houten is entitled to a payment from the ship's common stock for his injury, a lump sum to be paid from the very next prize taken. The amount is specified, 100 pieces of 8 for a broken leg. It's not a fortune, but it's a recognition of his sacrifice. More importantly, he has Jean-Luc. From that moment on, Jean-Luc becomes Van Houten's caretaker. He helps him move, brings him his food and water, and keeps his spirits up. He takes on extra mending work to make up for Van Houten's lost labor, ensuring their collective value to the crew remains high. There is no question of abandoning Van Houten. He is one half of a functioning economic unit, and that unit is protected by both the ship's code and the personal bond of his mate-lot. This is the genius of the Matelotage system. It wasn't just a contract, it was a microeconomy. By pooling their assets and their labor, two men could better weather the extreme risks of their profession. It was a diversification of personal risk. If one man was injured or killed, the other could carry on, ensuring their shared estate wasn't lost. Historians who focus on the economic aspects of piracy see Matelotage as a brilliant adaptation to the pirates' unique circumstances. It was a private solution to a public problem. Without a state to provide welfare or insurance, the pirates created their own system. It fostered loyalty and stability within the crew. A man with a mate-lot was literally more invested in the success of the voyage, as his partner's life and fortune were tied to his own. This economic partnership even extended to dealings on shore. When pirates came into a port like Nassau, which was for a time a veritable pirate republic, a pair of mate-lots would often buy a house or a plot of land together. They would run a shared household. This provided a stable base of operations between voyages. It was a small slice of domesticity in an otherwise chaotic life. One of the more peculiar and detailed accounts of this economic arrangement comes from a description of the pirates on Madagascar, who established a semi-permanent settlement there. Some accounts describe mate-lots who, having retired from the sea, lived together as partners, sharing their accumulated wealth, property, and sometimes even a local wife whose status in this arrangement is a whole other complex issue. The academic debate here isn't about whether this economic function existed, it clearly did. The debate is about its primary purpose. Was Matelotage fundamentally an economic arrangement, with the social and emotional bonds being a secondary benefit, or was it fundamentally a social and emotional bond, with the economic contract being a way to formalize and protect that relationship in their dangerous world? It's a chicken and egg question that historians love to ponder. Was it business or was it love? The truth is, it was likely an inseparable blend of both. You see this blend in Jean-Luc and Van Houten. Jean-Luc's care for his partner is clearly driven by deep affection. But it's also a sound financial decision. He is protecting his investment. Van Houten is a skilled carpenter, one of the most valuable men on the ship. By nursing him back to health, Jean-Luc ensures that his partner will be able to work again, to contribute to their shared purse on future voyages. Watching them, you understand that these men have created something that was denied to them in the civilized world they left behind. They have a future that is not solely dependent on their own luck and health. They have a partner who is bound by oath and affection to see them through the worst of times. It's a powerful, practical, and deeply human arrangement. And in the brutal world of the 18th century maritime life, it was nothing short of revolutionary. Weeks pass. Van Houten's leg begins to mend, thanks in no small part to Jean-Luc's constant care. The ship continues its hunt, and the rhythm of life at sea reasserts itself. You have more time to observe the crew, to see beyond the economics of their partnerships, and you begin to notice the subtleties, the emotional depth of these Matelotage bonds that the formal contracts don't capture. You see it in the small gestures. O'Malley, the old gunner, teaching his young mate Lot Finn how to carve a little bird out of a piece of driftwood. HES not teaching him a useful skill, HES just spending time with him, passing on a piece of himself. You see it in the way two other matelots, who are both taciturn, hard men, will simply sit together on the deck for an hour, at a comfortable domestic quiet, a rare commodity on a ship buzzing with 100 men. This is where the relationship transcends a simple economic arrangement. It becomes a form of companionship that fills the vast emotional void left by the absence of traditional family and society. In a world where you are constantly surrounded by danger, betrayal, and the prospect of a sudden, violent death, having one person you can trust implicitly is an emotional anchor. It keeps you sane. The debate among historians about the nature of these bonds often hinges on how one interprets love and friendship in the 18th century. The language of the time was different. Men wrote letters to each other filled with passionate, emotional language that a modern reader might interpret as romantic. My dearest friend, my beloved companion, this was standard language for close male friendships. So when we try to understand Matelotage, we're stuck looking through this historical lens. Were these men in love in the way we understand it today, or were they expressing a form of deep, platonic male friendship that our modern culture has largely lost? The academic field of the history of emotions grapples with exactly these kinds of questions. They ask whether emotions themselves have a history, whether the way people experienced love, grief, or friendship in the past was fundamentally different from how we do today. One argument is that, in the absence of women, the emotional needs for intimacy, affection, and companionship, needs that on land might be met by a wife, sister, or mother, were redirected towards other men. The mate-lot relationship became the primary vessel for all these complex emotional currents. It was a partnership that had to be everything: a business, a friendship, a family, and a support system. A less discussed but poignant aspect of this is how these bonds played out in times of grief. When a pirate was killed, his mate-lot was the chief mourner. He would be the one to prepare the body for its sea burial, to wrap it in a hammock with a cannonball for weight. He would be the one to say a few words as his partner was committed to the deep. The rest of the crew would be saddened by the loss of a shipmate, but for the surviving mate-lot, it was a profound personal bereavement, the loss of his other half. You can imagine that the promise of inheriting his partner's wealth was likely a cold comfort in that moment. A curious and somewhat strange piece of folklore that might hint at the depth of these bonds is the pirate belief in ghosts. Sailors in general were a superstitious lot, but pirate tales are filled with stories of ghost ships and the spirits of drowned men. Some of these stories specifically mention a ghost returning to haunt his former mate Lot, not in a menacing way, but as a lingering presence, a sign that the bond was so strong it couldn't be broken even by death. This is folklore, not hard evidence, but it hints at the powerful emotional reality of these partnerships. You witness this emotional depth firsthand. A sudden squall hits the ship one night. A wave crashes over the deck, sweeping a young sailor, one half of a matelot pair, against the ship's railing. His partner, without a second's hesitation, lunges forward and pulls him back from the brink, roaring at him to be more careful. It's not the anger of a superior, but the desperate, terrified anger of someone who almost lost the most important person in their world. You see past the contracts and the economics. You see the raw fierce and protective love at the heart of the relationship, whether it was platonic or romantic, sexual or non-sexual, is a question we may never be able to answer definitively for every case. Historians continue to argue, bringing new interpretations to the same scarce evidence. But what is clear is that these partnerships were far more than just business. They were a profound human response to an inhuman world. They were a way of creating family where none existed, of finding love and loyalty in the most lawless of places. You realize that the greatest treasure these men found was not in any captured hold, but in the steadfast companionship of another soul, adrift on the same lonely sea. The idea of Matelotage has been rolling around in your mind. You are the captain, respected and, for the moment, secure in your command. You have the largest share of the plunder in the best cabin, which is still just a cramped, damp room. But you are also the most isolated man on the ship. The crew are your subordinates. You can't be truly friends with them in the way they are with each other. A captain who gets too close to his men risks losing his mystique, the aura of authority he needs to command. You share their risks, but you can't fully share their camaraderie. You feel a profound loneliness. It's a quiet evening, and the ship is calm. You watch the pairs of matelots on deck, sharing a pipe, mending a sail, or just talking in low voices. You see the easy intimacy they share, and you feel its absence in your own life more keenly than ever. You think of a quartermaster Evans. He is your closest thing to an equal on the ship. Your roles are complementary. You command in battle, he commands in peace. You represent the ship's mission, he represents the crew's welfare. You have spent countless hours together, poring over charts, planning your next move, debating the application of the articles. You trust his judgment. He is steady, intelligent, and fair. You have come to rely on him not just as a colleague, but as a confidant. The idea forms slowly that all at once, you could ask him. You could propose a Matelotage. It would be a highly unusual arrangement. A captain and a quartermaster, the two most powerful men on the ship, formally binding themselves together. It could be seen as a consolidation of power, a move to create an unchallengeable ruling duo. The crew might become suspicious, fearing that the two of you are colluding to sideline their democratic rights. But it could also be seen as the ultimate commitment to the ship and its crew. A partnership between the two leaders would signal stability. It would mean that the captain and the quartermaster are in perfect alignment, their personal fortunes and their official duties completely intertwined. It would eliminate the possibility of a rift between the two most important officers on the ship. You decide to approach him. You find him on the quarterdeck, observing the set of the sails against the starry sky. You don't make a grand proposal. You start by talking about the future, about the risks you all face. You talk about what would happen if one of you were to fall in the next battle. Who would lead? How would the ship's stability be maintained? Evans listens patiently, his weathered face unreadable in the moonlight. He understands the chain of command. He says, "If you fell, the crew would elect a new captain. If you fell, they'd elect a new quartermaster. That is the way. But it's not just about the office," you say, choosing your words carefully. "It's about what we've built. The trust. The way we work together." You talk about the other matelots on board, how their partnership makes them stronger. You float the idea, not as a demand, but as a question. What if you two were to formalize your own partnership, combine your shares, name each other as heirs, stand together officially? He is silent for a long time, looking out at the dark water. You can't tell if he is considering it, or getting ready to laugh at your sentimentality. "It would make us both rich, if one of us was lucky enough to die first," he says, a hint of dry humor in his voice. But HES not dismissing it. HES thinking, the men might talk. Let them, you reply. They'll see it for what it is. A promise that this ship comes first, for both of us. The question of whether relationships like this between a captain and a high-ranking officer actually occurred is, like so much of pirate social life, a matter of speculation for historians. We have very little direct evidence. The most famous potential example might be the relationship between the notorious Blackbeard and his protege, a man named Israel Hands. Hands served as Blackbeard's second in command. Their partnership was legendary. However, it ended when Blackbeard, in a fit of drunken madness or perhaps as a calculated act to remind his crew who was in charge, shot Hands in the knee under the table during a drinking session, crippling him for life. This suggests a relationship that was certainly intense and close, but also volatile and built on a bedrock of fear and power, not necessarily mutual affection. Another strange historical tidbit that touches on this is the pirate retirement community that some historians believe existed in places like Madagascar. In these havens far from the reach of the law, successful pirates could settle down. Some accounts suggest that powerful pirate captains would establish themselves as local chieftains, sometimes sharing their power and wealth with a trusted lieutenant, a relationship that mirrored Matelotage on a grander, more permanent scale. Evans finally turns to you. "All right, Captain," he says with a small, rare smile. "It makes good sense. We'll have the articles amended in the morning. But if you get us sunk, I'll be sure to haunt you. By wait, you didn't even realize you were carrying lifts from your shoulders. You are still the captain, still isolated by your rank. But you are no longer entirely alone. You have a partner. Your fate is now tied to his, and his to yours. The future is no less dangerous, but it feels a little less lonely. You have forged your own family, your own emotional and economic anchor in this lawless, floating world. And as you head back to your cabin, you feel a sense of security that no amount of plunder could ever buy. The morning after you and Devons formalize your Matelotage, the lookout's cry shatters the calm. Sail, ho! Instantly the ship transforms. The quiet domesticity of the past few weeks vanishes, replaced by a surge of adrenaline and purpose. Men scramble to their stations, their movements economical and practiced. The mood is electric. This is what you are all here for. You climb the rigging with your spyglass, your heart pounding with a familiar mix of excitement and cold calculation. You brace yourself against the mast and raise the glass to your eye. She's a merchantman, you can tell by her broad, heavy profile. A brig, likely, plodding along, low in the water. That's a good sign. A ship sitting low in the water is a ship full of cargo. Spanish, by the cut of her sails. Even better. You slide back down to the deck, your mind already racing. You issue your first series of commands. Hard to port, run out the guns. Master O'Malley, a warning shot across her bow when we're in range. Don't hit her. The crew moves with a terrifying efficiency. The gun ports are thrown open, and the heavy cannons are run out, their black muzzles staring hungrily across the water. The ship leans as it turns, cutting through the waves, closing the distance on your unsuspecting prey. The pursuit is a delicate and deadly chess game. The historical reality of a pirate attack was rarely the chaotic, swashbuckling free for all seen in movies. It was a calculated process designed to maximize profit while minimizing risk. Your goal is not to sink the merchant ship. A sunken ship is worthless. Your goal is to intimidate her captain into surrendering without a fight. A fight means damage to both ships and, more important, crew. Experienced sailors are your most valuable asset, far more precious than any cargo. So, you begin the psychological warfare. The skull and crossbones, or whatever design your crew has chosen, is not just a symbol. It sends a clear message: we are pirates. Surrender now, and we will likely spare your lives and your ship. If you resist, we will show you no quarter. The no quarter part is signified by the red flag. The Jolie Rouge, which you will raise if they decide to fight. The red flag means you will kill everyone on board. You watch the merchantman through your glass. You can imagine the panic on her deck. I look out screaming, A captain shouting orders, a crew in chaos. They are likely armed with a few small cannons, but they are a merchant crew, not fighters. Their ship is slow and clumsy compared to your swift sloop. O'Malley's cannon roars, sending a ball skipping across the waves just in front of the brig's bow. It's a perfectly placed shot, a polite but firm knock on the door. You wait. The merchant ship makes a feeble attempt to turn and run, but it's hopeless. You are faster, more agile, and you're closing the gap with every passing minute. The decision to fight or surrender was a terrible one for a merchant captain. If he fought and lost, he and his crew could be slaughtered. If he surrendered without a fight, his employers might accuse him of cowardice and he could lose his career. Some captains were bound by their company's rules to resist. This leads to a rather grim but interesting historical debate. How effective was the pirate flag? Did it really work as a psychological tool? The consensus among most maritime historians is that it was incredibly effective. The pirates' reputation for violence was their greatest weapon. Most merchant crews, when faced with the black flag and a determined-looking pirate vessel, chose the sensible option and surrendered immediately. A little-known tactic pirates used to enhance this intimidation was to modify their ships to look more threatening. They would sometimes build flimsy, fake forecast-less or add extra gun ports with fake cannons made of painted logs to make their ship appear larger and more heavily armed than it actually was. It was all part of the show, the theatrical performance of being a pirate. The brig continues to flee, so you order a more persuasive shot. This time, O'Malley's crew aims for the rigging. The cannon fires, and you see a satisfying puff of splinters as the ball rips through the merchantman's main topsail. The sail tears and begins to flap uselessly. Her speed drops. The chase is almost over. You are now close enough to see the men on her deck clearly. They are running, trying to douse a small fire in the rigging, their efforts panicked and futile. Their captain stands on the quarterdeck, a lone figure, staring at your approaching ship. He knows he is beaten. Slowly you see their flag, the proud banner of Spain, begin to descend from the mast. He has surrendered. A cheer erupts from your crew. The tension breaks, replaced by triumphant shouts and laughter. The prize is yours. But as you give the order to prepare the grappling hooks and boarding party, a new set of problems begins to form in your mind. The chase is over. The complicated, messy business of the plunder is about to begin, and with it, a whole new set of challenges to your authority and your conscience. The two ships drift together, the sounds of your cheering crew echoing across the water. The captured brig looks battered and sad, her flag down, her torn sail flapping like a wounded wing. The thrill of the chase is over. Now comes the work. You lead the boarding party. As captain, it's your right and your duty. You need to be the first man on the prize to establish control immediately. You swing across on a rope, landing on the enemy deck with a dozen of your best men right behind you. There is no resistance. The Spanish crew is huddled on the main deck, their hands raised, their faces a mixture of terror and resignation. Their captain, a man with a grey-streaked beard and weary eyes, steps forward and formally offers you his sword, hilt first. You take it. It's a symbolic act that seals the transfer of power. The air is thick with the smell of burnt sailcloth and fear. Your men, flush with victory, are a barely controlled force. They are armed, their blood is up, and they see the ship and everything on it as their rightful prize. This is one of the most dangerous moments for a pirate captain. You have to let your crew feel their victory, but you cannot let them descend into a chaotic mob. Quartermaster, you shout, and Evans is right there, your steadying presence. Take an inventory, secure the officers. The crew is not to be harmed. This is a critical point. The mainstream historical view is that pirates, despite their violent reputation, generally preferred not to kill a crew that had surrendered. There were practical reasons for this. Firstly, dead men can't help you sail a captured ship to a safe harbor. Secondly, a reputation for mercy towards those who surrendered was good for business. It encouraged other ships to surrender without a fight. The no-quarter reed flag was a threat, and its power lay in the fact that it was rarely used. Your men spread out across the ship. The first thing they look for is the ship's surgeon and any skilled craftsman, like a carpenter or cooper. These men are valuable. You offer them the same choice you were once offered: join the crew and take a share, or be left with the other prisoners. Often, these men, who were poorly paid and treated on the merchant vessel, would willingly sign your articles. Then, the real work of plundering begins. It's not a frenzied search for a single treasure chest. It's a systematic stripping of assets. Your crew breaks into the cargo hold, and a triumphant shout tells you they found the main prize. Not gold doubloons, but something almost as good: barrels of fine wine, bolts of silk, and crates of valuable indigo dye. This is what real pirate treasure looked like most of the time. It was chests of jewels, it was commodities that could be easily sold in a pirate-friendly port. While the crew celebrates in the hold, you and Devons conduct a more thorough search of the captain's cabin. You are looking for the good stuff: cash, navigational charts, and personal valuables. The Spanish captain watches you, his face a stony mask. You find a small locked chest. One of your men smashes it open with an axe. Inside are several bags of silver coins, the ship's payroll and the captain's personal savings. This is a good haul. The atmosphere on the ship is becoming more chaotic. Some of your men have already broken into the captured wine barrels. The Spanish crew watches them with wide, fearful eyes. You know you need to maintain control. This is where the quartermaster's role is crucial. Evans, with a few steady hands, begins to assert order. He reminds the men that all plunder must be brought to the main deck to be logged and divided later, according to the articles. Grumbling, they comply. One of the lesser known, and frankly bizarre, items that pirates prized was medicine. In an age with no antibiotics, a well-stocked ship's medical chest was worth its weight in gold. They would seize mercury for treating syphilis, cinchona bark, quinine for malaria, and opium for pain. They understood that their health was their wealth. Another highly sought-after and often overlooked treasure was clothing. Many of your crew came to you with nothing but the rags on their backs. Pirates were famously flamboyant dressers, but this wasn't just vanity. It was a way of displaying their success. They would seize fine hats, silk shirts, and buckled shoes from the officers of captured ships, wearing their plunder as a badge of honor. As the sun begins to set, the initial chaos subsides into organized labor. Your men are transferring the most valuable cargo to your ship. You've made your decisions. You'll keep the Spanish brig for now. It's a solid ship, and you can use the extra space. You'll put a prize crew on it, under the command of a trusted sailor. The Spanish crew will be kept under guard until you can decide what to do with them. Everything seems to be under control. The plunder is secured, your men are celebrating but not out of hand, and you have a new ship for your small fleet. It's a perfect victory. But then, one of your men, a young recruit on his first raid, comes up from below decks. His face is pale. "Captain," he stammers, "you need to come see this. We found another passenger, hidden in a storage locker." He leads you down into the stuffy, dark corridors of the ship. And it's there, in a cramped, dark space behind some barrels, that your perfect victory becomes infinitely more complicated. The recruit holds up a lantern, and its flickering light illuminates a small hidden alcove. Huddled in the corner is a young woman, her eyes wide with terror. She can't be more than 20. She's dressed in fine clothes, now rumpled and stained, suggesting she's a passenger of some means. Beside her, trying to shield her, is an older woman, perhaps her mother or a chaperone. The festive mood on the deck above suddenly feels a world away. Down here, the air is thick with a new, dangerous tension. The young recruit who found them looks from them to you, his expression a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. Word will spread through the ship in minutes. This is the moment every pirate captain reads. It's a direct, visceral test of your authority and the strength of your ship's code. Your articles, like those of many pirate crews, explicitly forbid bringing women on board. The rule is there for a reason, to prevent exactly this kind of situation. The presence of these women on a ship full of 100 men who have been at sea for months, fueled by rum and victory, is a spark hovering over a powder keg. It could lead to jealousy, fighting, and the complete breakdown of discipline. You have several options, none of them good. You could, in theory, simply ignore them. Leave them on the captured brig, take the cargo, and sail away. But you've decided to keep the brig. They are on your property now. You are responsible. You could try to follow the letter of the law. The rule says no man shall seduce or carry to see a woman. It doesn't explicitly state what to do with women who are discovered as part of a prize. This ambiguity is a minefield. You look at the Spanish captain who you've brought with you. He pleads with you in broken English to protect them. The younger woman is his daughter. The older woman is her aunt. They were sailing to meet her fiancé, a wealthy merchant in Cuba. Your crew is starting to gather at the top of the ladder, their faces silhouetted against the evening sky. They are murmuring. You can hear the change in their tone. The disciplined sailors of an hour ago are being replaced by something more primal. They see these women not as people, but as another form of plunder. This is where the romantic myth of piracy crashes into a brutal reality. While some pirate captains like Bartholomew Black Bart Roberts were famously strict about their articles protecting women, many others were not. The historical record is filled with grim testimonies from captured women who suffered horrific abuse. Their fate was often to be treated as property, to be used and then discarded. You have to make a decision, and you have to make it now. Your authority depends on it. You turn to the crew members gathered at the hatch. These are passengers, not plunder, you say, your voice louder and harder than you intended. They are to be confined to the captain's old cabin, unharmed. Anyone who bothers them will answer to me and the quartermaster. Is that understood? There's a moment of silence. You are pushing against the tide of their expectations. Then a voice from the back. It's Cobb, your old rival. The articles say, "No women amongst us, Captain," he calls out. Says it plain as day. What do we do with them? We can't keep them. HES not wrong. HES using the code against you. This is a direct challenge, cloaked in the language of law. This is a point of significant academic debate. How much power did a captain have to enforce his will in a situation like this? Against the desires of his crew, some historians believe that a strong captain, especially one with the backing of his quartermaster and other senior men, could enforce a humane outcome. Others argue that in the heat of the moment, with plunder and rum flowing, a captain was often powerless against the collective will of a violent, armed crew. The outcome likely varied wildly from ship to ship, captain to captain. A strange, and possibly apocryphal, story that speaks to this dilemma is that of a pirate captain who, upon capturing a ship with the governor's beautiful young wife, immediately married her, by making her as his personal property, which, in a twisted way, protected her from being claimed as common property by the crew. It was a pragmatic, if morally dubious solution. You lock eyes with Cobb. You cannot back down. The articles are to prevent disorder, you say, your voice low and dangerous. And I will maintain order. They will be treated as prisoners of war, with the respect due to their station. We will ransom them. A governor's daughter is worth more to us alive and unharmed than any other way. Think of the gold, men. A massive ransom. You've changed the narrative. You've turned the women from a source of conflict into a potential source of immense profit. You are appealing to their greed, the one instinct more powerful than their lust. You see the calculation in their eyes, the murmuring shifts. Ransom. Gold. The idea takes root. Evans, your mate and quartermaster, steps forward to back you up. The captain is right, he says, his voice steady. They are worth a fortune. Lock them in the cabin, post a guard. And the guard will be one of us. He points to himself and another trusted veteran. The crisis is averted for now. The crew, grumbling but placated by the promise of wealth, disperses. You have the women escorted to the brig's now empty captain's cabin and locked the door. You have asserted your authority and, for a moment, held the line of civility. But as you walk back onto the deck, you feel a chill. You haven't solved the problem, you've only postponed it. You now have 2 women on a ship full of pirates, and a promise of a ransom you have no idea how to collect. The victory feels hollow, replaced by a sense of deep, looming dread. You stand on the deck of your ship, the captured brig sailing clumsily in your wake, and you feel the weight of your decision. The crew is busy, transferring supplies and securing the prize, but the atmosphere has changed. The simple, triumphant joy of the capture has been replaced by a tense, watchful quiet. The locked door of the brig's cabin has become the focal point of everyone's attention. You and Devons made a show of standing the first watch outside that door yourselves. It was a clear, non-verbal statement: these women are under our direct protection. But you can't stand guard forever. The rest of the crew now takes turns, always in pairs of trusted veterans. But you see the looks on their faces. You see the way they glance at the door. You hear the crude jokes and the speculative whispers. Your appeal to their greed worked for a moment, but it hasn't erased their baser instincts. This is the central conflict between the pirate code and human nature. The articles were a noble experiment in self-governance, an attempt to impose order on a lawless world. But they were just words on a piece of sailcloth. They had no power on their own. Their only power came from the collective will of the crew to enforce them. And that will was a fickle, unreliable thing, easily swayed by rum, greed, and desire. The case of Captain John Phillips and his crew provides a stark historical example. The articles of his ship, the Revenge, were recorded and have survived. They are famously strict. Article VI states, if any man shall offer to meddle with a prudent woman or a maid without her consent, he shall suffer present death. It's unambiguous. It seems to offer absolute protection. But how did this play out in reality? Shortly after this code was written, Phillips's crew captured his ship. The testimony of a fisherman who was also captured and later escaped paints a grim picture. He reported that the pirates abused the master's wife. The code, for all its stern authority, was ignored. The pirates, in that moment, chose to follow their impulses rather than their own laws. This contradiction is at the heart of the historical debate. Why would pirates create such a strict rule only to break it? Some historians argue that the rule wasn't primarily about protecting women's honor, but about protecting the ship's order. It was a pragmatic measure to prevent the crew from fighting over a captured woman. When a whole crew decided to act together, the rule became moot. There was no one left to enforce it. Others suggest that these rules might have been a form of propaganda. Perhaps pirates like Bartholomew Roberts, who was known as a pious, teetotaling man, a rarity to be sure, genuinely tried to enforce a moral code. But for many others, the articles might have been for show, a way to create a semi-respectable veneer over their violent enterprise. A strange and little-known aspect of this is the concept of a prudent woman mentioned in Phillips's code. What does that even mean? Does it imply that an imprudent woman was fair game? The term is vague and deeply problematic from a modern perspective, but it reflects the 18th century mindset. It likely referred to a married woman or a young, unmarried maid of good social standing. A prostitute or a serving wench might not have been afforded the same protection under this code. It reveals a class-based and deeply misogynistic worldview, even within a supposedly revolutionary pirate society. You are living this contradiction right now. You have declared the captain's daughter and her aunt off limits. You have framed it as an economic decision, but you know that a significant portion of your crew, perhaps even a majority, would choose a different path if given a free vote. Your authority, and the lives of these two women, are balanced on a knife's edge. You see Cobb, your rival, talking to a group of his cronies. They are laughing, and their laughter has a cruel edge to it. He is stirring up trouble, reminding the men of what they feel they are being denied. He is painting you as a weak captain, one who cares more for the welfare of prisoners than for the desires of his own crew. You need to do something to re-establish your control and to defuse the situation. You decide on a bold, risky move. You will divide some of the plunder now, not later. You announce that the silver coins found in the captain's chest will be distributed immediately. It's a calculated gamble. By giving the crew a taste of their earnings, you remind them of why they are here to get rich. You are focusing their attention from the locked cabin to their own pockets. The quartermaster begins the count, and the men gather around, their excitement palpable. For a few hours, the women are forgotten, replaced by the satisfying clink of silver. It works for now. You have bought yourself some time, but you know this is only a temporary solution. The presence of the women remains a festering problem. You have to get them off your ship. The idea of a ransom, which you threw out as a desperate ploy, has now become an absolute necessity, but the coast of Cuba is hundreds of miles away. It will be a long, tense voyage, with that locked door a constant, silent challenge to your command into the fragile laws of your floating world. The voyage to the coast of Cuba is the most tense journey of your life. The two ships, yours and the captured brig, sail together under a fragile truce. Every day feels like a week. The presence of the two women, though they remain locked away and unseen, has soured the victory. The crew is restless and divided. Your faction, the men loyal to you on Devon's, stands firm, but Cobb's faction is growing, fueled by grumbling on discontent. You try to keep the men busy with the endless, back-breaking work of maintaining two ships. But in the quiet hours, the tension is always there. You've decided to avoid the major ports. You can't just sail into Havana and announce you have the governor's daughter for sale. You need to find a quiet, isolated spot on the coast to make contact. After a week of sailing, you find it a small, hidden cove surrounded by dense jungle. It's the perfect place to lie low. You anchor the ships and decide on the next phase of your plan. You will send a messenger. The Spanish captain, broken and defeated, writes a letter to his prospective son-in-law, the wealthy merchant in a nearby town. The letter explains the situation and names your price as staggering sum in gold. It also contains a chilling warning if any tricks are attempted. If the Navy is alerted, his daughter and her aunt will pay the price. To prove you are serious, you include the captain's silver signet ring, which you took from him. Now who to send? It's a dangerous mission. The messenger could be captured, tortured for information, or simply disappear. You can't go yourself. You need a man who is clever, expendable, and, most importantly, someone you can trust to come back. You choose one of the Spanish sailors from the captured crew, a man who seems more pragmatic than loyal to his old captain. You promise him his freedom and a small share of the silver if he delivers the message and returns with a reply. He agrees. He rows ashore in a small dinghy at dusk and vanishes into the jungle. And then you wait. The next 2 days are unbearable. The crew's mood darkens. The ransom now feels real, but also remote. What if the messenger betrays you? What if the merchant refuses to pay? What if the Spanish Navy is already on its way? During this wait, you allow the women out of their cabin for a few hours each day, under heavy guard for fresh air on the deck of the brig. You see the Spanish captain's daughter up close for the first time in the daylight. She's terrified, but there is a fire of defiance in her eyes. She meets your gaze, and you feel a pang of something you can't quite name. It's not pity, exactly. It's a grim recognition of the chaos you have brought into her life. Her story, and the story of her aunt, will never be properly told. This is a sad truth of history. The voices of women in these situations are almost entirely absent from the historical record. We have the accounts of pirates, the testimonies of captured male sailors, the records of trials. But the women themselves rarely got to tell their own stories. Their experiences, the terror, the uncertainty, the abuse are lost to us, reduced to a footnote in the story of the men who captured them. Historians who study women and gender in the early modern period call this archival silence. The official documents, the sources we rely on to write history, were created by men, for men, and about men's activities. The experiences of women, especially traumatic ones, were simply not considered important enough to record. We can only guess at what these two women were feeling, what they said to each other in the privacy of their locked cabin. A rare and debated exception is the story of a woman named Maria of Anderkist, who was captured by pirates in the Red Sea. A sensationalized account of her ordeal was published, claiming she was forced to become the pirate captain's lover. But historians are deeply skeptical of this account. It was likely a piece of popular fiction, written to sell copies, not to record the truth. It tells us more about what 18th century readers wanted to believe about pirates than about the actual experience of a captured woman. On the third day of waiting, a boat is spotted rowing from the shore. It's the messenger. He has a letter. The merchant has agreed to the terms. He will pay. The relief is so intense it feels like a physical blow. The crew erupts in a genuine cheer, the first in weeks. The plan has worked. Your gamble has paid off. The exchange is set for the following night on a deserted beach. The merchant will bring half the gold. Once the women are safely ashore, you will send the other half. It's a tense, risky arrangement, but it's the only way. You spend the next 24 hours in a state of high alert, watching the coastline for any sign of a Spanish patrol. The women are brought over to your ship, ready for the transfer. As you help the captain's daughter from the boat to the deck, her hand briefly touches yours. It's cold as ice. You don't say a word to her, and she doesn't say one to you. There is nothing to say. You are her captor, the architect of her terror, and she is your ticket to wealth and safety. As night falls, you row to the beach with a small, heavily armed party. The two women are with you, silent and cloaked. In the moonlight, you see a figure on the beach, standing next to several heavy-looking chests. The ransom is real. Your nightmare is almost over. The exchange on the moonlit beach is tense enough to cut with a knife. You and your men stand on one side with the two women. On the other side is the merchant, a surprisingly young man with two guards. The chests of gold are on the sand between you. It's a scene straight out of a storybook, but the fear is real and suffocating. The merchant's eyes are locked on the Spanish captain's daughter. You can see the anguish on his face. He follows your instructions, opening one of the chests to show you the gleam of gold coins. It's real. Your men let out a low, hungry hiss of approval. The trade is made. The women walk across the sand, their ordeal finally over. As his fiancée reaches him, the merchant embraces her, a moment of profound, private relief in a very public, dangerous space. You and your men waste no time. You haul the heavy chests back to your boat and row back to the ships as fast as you can. You don't wait for the second half of the payment. To linger is to invite disaster. You've gotten more than enough. As you sail away from the coast of Cuba, leaving the brig behind for the Spanish to recover, a wave of pure, unadulterated relief washes over the ship. The crew is ecstatic. They are rich. The tension that has poisoned the air for weeks is gone, burned away by the glittering reality of gold. Casks of rum are opened, the fiddle plays, and for the first time in a long time, the ship is filled with genuine, uncomplicated celebration. But as the captain, you don't feel the same pure joy. You feel the weight of what has just happened. The raid was a success, a massive financial victory. But it has left a mark, a shadow on you and your crew that you can't quite shake. You saw it in the eyes of your men during the long, tense voyage. The incident with the women brought out something ugly, the darkness that the pirate code and your authority could barely contain. You saw men you trusted, good sailors, look at those prisoners with a predatory gleam in their eyes. You saw how quickly the veneer of civilization, even your rough pirate version of it, could be stripped away. This is the psychological toll of the life you've chosen. The act of plunder, of taking what you want by force, changes a man. It's not just about the physical violence of a battle. It's about the constant state of aggression, the normalization of predation. You live in a world where empathy is a liability and ruthlessness is a virtue. Historians and psychologists have long debated the mental state of men in such extreme professions. Some theories of moral injury suggest that committing acts that go against one's own moral compass, even if they are justified by the circumstances, can leave deep and lasting psychological wounds. Were pirates sociopaths who were drawn to this life, or were they ordinary men who were slowly brutalized by the constant violence and lawlessness of their environment? The truth is likely a mix of both. You see the effects on your crew. Some men drink more heavily now, seeking to numb something they don't want to face. Fights break out over nothing, fueled by a simmering aggression that has nowhere else to go now that the chase is over. They are richer than they have ever been, but they are not happier. The gold has not brought them peace. A little-known but fascinating detail from pirate history is the high rate of what we would now call self-destructive behavior. Besides the drinking and fighting, pirates were notorious for their reckless spending. A common story, repeated in many contemporary accounts, tells of pirates who would receive a massive share of plunder, go ashore, and spend it all in a matter of days on drink and debauchery, returning to the ship broken and ready for the next risky voyage. Was this just carefree living, or was it a symptom of a deeper trauma, a desire to obliterate the memories of how they earned that money? There is an ongoing academic discussion about whether pirates suffered from what we would now recognize as post-traumatic stress disorder (PTSD), the constant threat of death, the participation in brutal violence. The isolation is a textbook recipe for psychological trauma. But applying modern psychological categories to historical figures is always tricky. We can't put Blackbird on a therapist's couch. We can only observe his behavior, the theatricality, the rages, the heavy drinking, and speculate about the troubled mind that lay beneath. You look at your own hands. These are the hands that took a captain's sword, that held a pistol, that helped a terrified woman from a boat. You tell yourself it was all a means to an end. You tell yourself you maintained order, that you prevented the worst from happening. But you know that you crossed a line. You orchestrated a kidnapping. You terrorized a family. The shadow of this realization lingers long after the celebration has died down. You are a successful pirate captain. You have led your crew to a great prize. But the violence of your profession isn't just something you inflict on others. It's a poison that you and your men have taken into yourselves, a shadow that will follow you across every empty sea. With your holds heavy with gold and your crew rich and restless, there's only one thing to do: find a friendly port. You need a place to lie low, to spend your money, and to make repairs. You need a pirate haven. You set your course for Nassau, on the island of New Providence in the Bahamas. In the early 18th century, for a brief, glorious period, Nassau was the capital of the pirate world. It was a true pirate republic. After the English garrison abandoned it, the town became a lawless sanctuary for the most famous pirates of the age. Blackbird, Calico Jack Crackham, Charles Vane and Bonnie, Mary Read, they all walked its sandy streets. As you sail into the harbor, you see a forest of masts. Dozens of pirate ships, from small sloops to larger captured frigates, are anchored in the turquoise water. The town itself is a chaotic sprawl of taverns, brothels, and warehouses, thrown together from driftwood and salvaged timber. There is no law here but the law of the strongest, no authority but the collective will of the Brethren of the Coast, as the pirates called themselves. Dropping anchor feels like coming home, or at least the closest thing to it you have. For the first time in months, you can relax your guard. Here you are not a fugitive. You are a citizen, a successful one at that. The news of your massive haul from the Spanish has already spread through the harbor, carried by the mysterious, faster-than-light communication of the seafaring world. You and your men row ashore, your pockets bulging with gold and silver. The moment your feet hit the sand, the carefully maintained discipline of the ship evaporates. The crew, who for months have been a single, functioning unit, dissolves into 100 individual men, each bent on their own pleasure. They disappear into the maze of taverns, their joyous shouts echoing through the town. You know you won't see most of them again for days, and when you do, they will be broke. You, Evans, and a few of your most trusted men find a tavern that is slightly less raucous than the others. The air inside is thick with tobacco smoke and the sweet, heavy smell of rum. You order around, and for the first time, you drink not from a limited ship's ration, but from an endless supply. The rum is rough, but it tastes like freedom. This is the surely fantasy that keeps a sailor going through the long, lonely months at sea, but the reality is often grim. The primary business of a town like Nassau or its earlier counterpart, Port Royal in Jamaica, was separating pirates from their money as quickly as possible. The tavern keepers, the merchants, the prostitutes, they were all experts at this. A pirate's share that took months of risk and hardship to earn could be gone in a single week of excess. The historical image of these pirate havens is one of non-stop, joyous debauchery. And while there was certainly plenty of that, they were also dangerous, squalid, and disease-ridden places. The lack of sanitation meant that diseases like typhoid and dysentery were rampant. The constant presence of armed, drunk, and volatile men meant that a simple argument could turn deadly in an instant. It is in these ports that your crew will find they have access to women. But these encounters are a world away from any notion of romance or companionship. They are purely transactional. The women in a place like Nassau are themselves survivors, often with grim backstories of their own. They are there to do a job, to extract as much money as they can from the pirates before the pirates drink it all away or get themselves killed. These interactions are brief, impersonal, and carry their own immense risks. One of the strangest and most debated aspects of pirate shore leave is the sheer scale of the spending. Accounts from the time describe pirates buying barrels of wine just to watch them flow down the street, lighting their pipes with burning currency, and adorning themselves in ludicrously expensive, stolen finery. Was this just simple-minded excess, or was it a form of theatrical performance? Some historians argue that this conspicuous consumption was a way for these men, who came from the lower rungs of society, to mock the very idea of wealth and class. By treating gold with such contempt, they were rebelling against the world that valued it so highly. It was a political statement, a radical act of defiance against the consumer culture that was just beginning to emerge in Europe. You watch your men, and you see both the joy and the desperation. They are living entirely in the present moment, because the future is so uncertain. They might be captured and hanged on their next voyage. They might die of disease in this very town, so they burn through their money and their health with a feverish intensity, trying to squeeze a lifetime of living into a few short weeks. You, however, are more prudent. You and Evans use a portion of your wealth to buy a small house, a shared base of operations for your Matelotage. You also meet with the merchants who operate in the shadows here. These are the men who will buy your stolen ido and silk, no questions asked. They are the fences, the money launderers, the essential link that turns your plunder into usable wealth. As you conclude your business, you step out into the tropical night. The sounds of drunken singing and the occasional pistol shot fill the air. You are safe, you are rich, and you are free. But looking at the chaos around you, you realize this is not a sustainable life. This pirate republic, this beautiful lawless, this paradise, cannot last. It is a fleeting dream, a temporary autonomous zone, and you know that the forces of order and empire are gathering just over the horizon, preparing to wake you all up. The days in Nassau blur into a hazy, rum-soaked montage. You've taken care of business, the cargo is sold, the ship is being careened and repaired, and your share of the gold is safely stashed away. Now, you allow yourself to indulge in the brief, fleeting pleasures that this pirate paradise has to offer. Your life at sea is one of extreme deprivation. It's a world of hard work, bad food, and enforced celibacy punctuated by moments of terror. The shore leave in a place like Nassau is the polar opposite. It's a world of total indulgence, a frantic attempt to make up for the hardships of the voyage. You and Evans, your mate Lot, navigate this world with more caution than your crew. You avoid the most riotous taverns where a stray pistol ball is a real occupational hazard, but you still partake. You eat fresh fruit for the first time in months. You dine on roasted pig instead of salted beef. You sleep in a real bed that doesn't sway. These simple luxuries feel more valuable than the gold in your purse. And of course, there is the matter of female companionship. After months in an all-male world, the desire for it is a powerful force. But the reality of these encounters in a pirate port is stripped of all romance. It is a straightforward commercial transaction. The women who work in the brothels and taverns of Nassau are as much a part of this pirate economy as the merchants who buy your stolen goods. They are there to provide a service. The encounters are brief, impersonal, and driven by a mutual, if unspoken, understanding you are paying for a temporary illusion of intimacy and affection. This is a far cry from the complex emotional bonds of Matelotage that define your life on the ship. Those relationships, whatever their nature, are built on trust, mutual support, and shared experience. The encounters on shore are the opposite. They are anonymous, fleeting, and carry no emotional weight. For many pirates, this was precisely the point. It was a release of physical tension without the complications of a real relationship. The historical view of prostitution in these pirate havens confirms this. Port Royal, before it was destroyed by an earthquake, was famously called the wickedest city in the world, largely due to the sheer number of taverns and brothels catering to pirates and privateers. The women who worked there were often indentured servants who had been tricked into coming to the New World, or women with no other means of survival. It was a brutal, exploitative business. The pirates, for their part, were often not seeking tenderness. They were seeking a release. The encounters were often rough, fueled by alcohol, and treated as just another commodity to be purchased. You see it in the way your crewmates swagger and boast about their exploits. It's not about connection, it's about consumption. Herein lies a deep and fascinating contradiction that historians often discuss. On the one hand, some pirate codes, like that of Bartholomew Roberts, seem to promote a kind of puritanical morality, forbidding gambling and decrying that lights be out by 8 p. On the other hand, the behavior of pirates on shore was famously hedonistic and debauched. How do we reconcile these two images? Some historians argue that the strict rules on the ship were purely pragmatic, designed to maintain order and readiness for battle. Once that necessity was removed on shore, their true nature was revealed. Others suggest that the pirates saw the ship and the shore as two completely different moral universes. The ship was a place of work, discipline, and brotherhood. The shore was a place of chaos and indulgence, a temporary escape from the rules of their own making. A particularly bizarre and less discussed aspect of these shore-leave encounters was the occasional mock marriage. Some accounts describe pirates marrying a prostitute for the duration of their stay in port. They would hold a drunken ceremony, and the pirate would treat the woman as his wife, lavishing her with gifts and money until he was ready to sail again. Then the marriage would be dissolved, and he would leave. It was a strange pantomime of domestic life, a temporary fantasy played out before returning to the harsh, womanless reality of the sea. You watch your crew, and you see the toll this lifestyle takes. The frantic pursuit of pleasure seems to exhaust them more than it restores them. They are burning through their money, their health, and their humanity. The gold they fought so hard for is being exchanged for cheap rum, fleeting pleasures, and the high probability of a nasty disease. You and Devons have been more careful, but you are not immune to the atmosphere of the place. You find yourselves drinking more than you should, your conversations growing louder, your tempers shorter. The corrosive nature of this paradise begins to wear on you. After 2 weeks, the money is running out, and the novelty has worn off. The repairs on the ship are complete. A restlessness begins to settle in among the men who are now broken board. The taverns no longer seem so inviting. The brief, transgational encounters feel hollow and unsatisfying. You realize that for all its hardships, the life at sea has a clarity and purpose that this shore life lacks. On the ship, you have a role, a community, a shared goal. Here, you are just another consumer, adrift in a sea of cheap thrills. It's a surprising realization. You actually miss the ship. You miss the discipline, the camaraderie, and the clean salt air. It's time to return to the world you understand, the world you understand, the world of the hunter. You gather your crew. It's not an easy task. You have to pull them out of taverns and flop houses, many of them nursing headaches and empty pockets. But the promise of another voyage, another chance at a fortune, is a powerful lure. As they straggle back to the ship, they look weathered and worn not from the sea, but from their time on land. Shore leave has left them poorer and, in many cases, sicker. Soon after you set sail from Nassau, the invisible consequences of your time in port begin to manifest. It starts with a single sailor, a young man, complaining of a persistent rash and painful sores. The ship's surgeon, with his limited knowledge, examines him and shakes his head grimly. He has seen it before. He calls it the French disease or the Great Pox. Today we call it syphilis. Soon another sailor comes forward with similar symptoms. Then another. And it's not just syphilis. Other men complain of painful urination and discharge, the classic signs of gonorrhea. The brief transcational encounters in the brothels of Nassau have come with a hidden, terrible price. A wave of venereal disease is sweeping through your crew. In the 21st century, these diseases are treatable with antibiotics. In the early 18th century, they were a life sentence. There was no cure, but ineffective and often horrific. The most common treatment for syphilis was mercury. The surgeon would have the men ingest it or rub it on their sores in the form of an ointment. The idea was that the mercury would poison the disease. The problem is mercury is a neurotoxin. It poisons the patient right along with the disease. The side effects were devastating severe skin irritation, toothless, neurological damage, and eventually madness and death. The phrase "a night with Venus, a lifetime with Mercury" was a grimly accurate summary of the fate of many sailors. You watch your men suffer, knowing that the cure is as bad as the disease. This is a part of pirate life that is almost completely erased from the romantic legends. We imagine pirates dying heroically in battle or being defiantly hanged. We don't imagine them dying a slow, painful, undignified death from a sexually transmitted infection. But the historical reality is that disease, in all its forms, was a far more common killer of sailors than combat. Scurvy, dysentery, yellow fever, and, of course, venereal diseases were the true terrors of the sea. The rampant spread of STDs on pirate ships is a well-documented, if unpleasant fact. The pirate havens like Nassau and Port Royal were breeding grounds for these infections. The transient population of sailors, moving from port to port, acted as a vector, spreading the diseases throughout the Atlantic world. This leads to a rather grim historical debate were pirates more or less affected by these diseases than sailors in the legitimate navies on one hand. Pirates had more frequent access to shore leave and prostitutes, increasing their exposure. Naval sailors might be at sea for years at a time, limiting their opportunities. On the other hand, pirates often had better nutrition which helped the immune system and, as you saw on the captured Spanish ship, they would actively plunder medical supplies, including the mercury used for treatment. The records are too spotty to give a definitive answer, but it's safe to say that for any man who spent his life at sea in the 18th century, STDs were a constant and terrifying threat. One of the strangest and most pitiful details to emerge from this is how pirate crews dealt with severely afflicted men. An interesting clause appears in some pirate articles, including those of Bartholomew Roberts. It stated that if a man became a cripple or was too sick to perform his duties, he would not be abandoned. He was allowed to remain on the ship and would still receive a full share of the plunder. This was an incredibly progressive disability policy for the time. However, it likely applied to men injured in battle. A man slowly wasting away from syphilis, becoming a burden and a constant, grim reminder of their collective fate, might have faced a different reality. The crew's compassion had its limits. The presence of the disease on your ship has a corrosive effect on morale. The men who are sick are in pain, and their physical decline is a source of fear for the healthy. The men who are healthy are paranoid, watching themselves for any sign of infection. The easy camaraderie of the crew is fractured by suspicion and fear. Who is sick, who isn't, who brought this plague upon them? You, as captain, have to manage this new crisis. You and Devons, your mate Lot, were more cautious in Nassau, but you are not immune to the fear. You enforce a strict hygiene regime, as much as is possible on a crowded ship. You have the surgeon dispense the mercury treatments, even though you suspect they do more harm than good. You have to be seen to be doing something. The men are suffering, and they are angry. Their anger needs a target. They can't be angry at the women in Nassau, who are a faceless memory. They can't be angry at the disease itself, so they become angry at each other, at their officers, and at you. The invisible enemy of disease is breeding a new kind of mutiny, one born of pain and despair. The ship sails on, but it feels like a hospital-ward adrift at sea. The sharp, metallic smell of mercury ointment now mingles with the familiar sense of tar and salt. The groans of men in pain are a constant, low underscore to the creaking of the ship. The diseases you contracted in Nassau are not just a temporary inconvenience, they are actively rotting your crew from the inside out. You watch as strong, capable sailors are reduced to shivering, weakened shadows of their former selves. The mercury treatments cause their gums to recede and their teeth to loosen and fall out. They suffer from tremors, memory loss, and fits of rage. It's impossible to tell where the symptoms of the syphilis end and the effects of mercury poisoning begin. Your ship is a floating case study in 18th century medical malpractice. The physical decay is horrific, but the psychological impact is just as severe. The men know there is no cure. They are watching their own slow, inevitable decline. This knowledge breeds a profound sense of hopelessness, which coalesces into a dangerous, fatalistic recklessness. If you're already dying, why not take foolish risks? Why not drink yourself into a stupor every night? Why not pick a fight over nothing? Discipline, which was already strained, begins to break down completely. Men refuse to follow orders, claiming they are too sick to work. Fights become more frequent and more vicious. The quartermaster Heavens is constantly busy, trying to mediate disputes and maintain a semblance of order, but it's like trying to patch 100 leaks in a sinking boat. Your authority as captain is tested daily. The crew in their misery need someone to blame. And you are the one who lead them to Nassau. You are the one who lead them to the prize that gave them the money to buy their own destruction. Their logic is twisted, but their anger is real. This slow decay of a pirate crew due to disease is a theme that runs through many historical accounts. Though it's often in the background, we have the dramatic final stand of Blackbird at a Crococo Inlet. But we rarely hear about the men on his crew who were likely already suffering from the debilitating effects of syphilis or other diseases. How did their physical weakness affect their ability to fight? This leads to a fascinating if grim debate among military and medical historians. How much did disease influence the outcomes of historical battles? Both on land and at sea, it's an incredibly difficult variable to measure. A crew weakened by sickness might be slower to reload a cannon, less steady in their aim, less aggressive in a boarding action. It's possible that many pirate crews were defeated not by the superior tactics or firepower of the Navy, but by the simple fact that they were too sick to fight effectively. One of the most peculiar and sad details about this reality is the effect it had on the pirate's appearance. The romantic image of a pirate is a swarthy, handsome rogue. The reality was often disfigured by his lifestyle. Syphilis in its latest can cause horrific facial lesions under collapse of the nasal bridge, a condition known as saddle nose. Add to that the tooth loss from scurvy and mercury poisoning, the scars from fights and battles, and the sun-beaten skin, and the picture that emerges is not of a romantic hero but of a broken-down, prematurely aged man. You see this transformation happening to your own crew. Men who were young and hale when they signed your articles now look 10 or 20 years older. Their faces are gone, their eyes hollow, the easy confidence they once had is gone, replaced by a sullen, desperate anger. Your Matelotage with Evans becomes a crucial anchor in this sea of misery. You are both healthy, having been more cautious in port. This shared good fortune strengthens your bond but also isolates you further from the crew. You are the healthy leaders of a sick ship. You and Evans spend long nights in your cabin, not just planning the ship's course, but trying to figure out how to hold your little society together as it rots from within. You make a difficult decision. You cannot continue to hunt for prizes with a crew in this condition. They are a danger to themselves and to you. You need a new plan. You need to find a place to rest, to recover, to let the disease run its course, for better or for worse. You announce a change of course. You are not going to the busy shipping lanes. You are heading for a remote, uninhabited island you know of, a place far from the Navy, from merchants, and from the temptations of another port. You are putting your ship and your crew into quarantine. The announcement is met with a mixture of grumbling and relief. Some men want the thrill of another chase, another chance at gold before they die. But most seem to understand the necessity of it. They are tired, they are sick, they need a respite. As you steer the ship towards this new, uncertain sanctuary, you look at the faces of your men. They are not the bold, confident adventurers you once led. They are the walking wounded casualties of a war fought not with cannons and cutlasses, but with microbes in the dark alleys of a pirate port. And you wonder how many of them will be strong enough to ever leave the island you are sailing to. You find your sanctuary, a crescent of whites and beach encircling a calm, blue lagoon on an island that appears on no official chart. It's a paradise visually, but for your crew, it's a sanatorium. You anchor the ship, and the men, at least those who are able, row ashore. They set up a crude camp, a collection of tents made from spare sails and driftwood huts. For the first time in a long time, there is no work to be done. No sails to mend, no decks to scrub, no watches to stand. The golden age of piracy, that brief, intense period from roughly 1690 to the mid-1720s, is coming to an end. You can feel it. It's not just the disease that is rotting your crew, the entire pirate world is decaying. The very conditions that allowed piracy to flourish are disappearing. The European nations, tired of the constant disruption to their colonial trade, have finally had enough. After the end of the War of the Spanish Succession, they found themselves with a surplus of naval ships and unemployed sailors. At first, this surplus of sailors fueled piracy. Now, the surplus of ships is being used to hunt it down. You hear the stories from passing ships you encounter from a safe distance. The Royal Navy, under the command of energetic and ruthless governors like S. Rogers in the Bahamas, is launching a systematic campaign to eradicate the pirate threat. They are no longer just reacting to attacks, they are proactively hunting pirates in their own havens. Rogers' arrival in Nassau in 1718 was a turning point. He brought with him not only a fleet of warships but also a royal proclamation, the king's pardon. Any pirate who surrendered by a certain date would be granted a full pardon for their crimes. It was a brilliant move, a weapon that targeted the pirates' greatest weakness, their lack of a future. This offer of a pardon fractured the pirate community. It created a deep rift between those who were willing to give up the life and return to civilized society and the hardliners who refused to bow to any authority. The infamous Pirate Republic of Nassau collapsed not in a great sea battle but from within, as hundreds of pirates chose to accept the pardon, leaving the diehards isolated and outnumbered. The debate among historians about the pardon is fascinating. Was it a genuine act of mercy or a cynical but effective to love empire by pardoning the rank-and-file pirates? The authorities could gather intelligence and concentrate their forces on hunting down the unrepentant leaders like Blackbeard and Charles Vane. It was a classic divide-and-conquer strategy, and it worked perfectly. As you sit on your deserted island, you and your crew are a microcosm of this larger decline. The disease is your pardon, a force that has taken you out of the game. You are no longer hunters. You are just survivors. The days on the island are long and monotonous. The sick are tended to by the healthy. Men who are able go fishing and hunting for turtles and wild goats to supplement your dwindling supplies. A strange, quiet domesticity settles over the camp. In the absence of the pressures of sailing and fighting, the men's relationships change. The bonds of Matelotage become even more important, as partners care for each other through the fevers and pains of their illnesses. New friendships form. Old rivalries seem to fade, pointless in the face of this shared, slow-motion crisis. A little-known aspect of these final days of piracy is the emergence of what some historians call pirate nests or hidden retirement communities. The idea is that some pirates, seeing the writing on the wall, didn't accept the pardon or fight to the death. Instead, they took their accumulated wealth and simply disappeared. They established small, secret communities in remote, uncharted territories on islands in the Caribbean, in the river deltas of the Carolinas, or even as far away as Madagascar. They attempted to live out their days in peace, far from the reach of the law. There is very little hard documentary evidence for these communities, making them a source of romantic speculation and historical debate. Are there pirate descendants living in these remote areas today? It's a tantalizing, if improbable, thought. You look at your own camp. Is this what you have become, a secret retirement community for the sick and the damned? You are safe, for now. But your supplies won't last forever. The ship, your only link to the outside world, needs constant maintenance. The crew is getting weaker. This island is not a permanent solution. It's a purgatory. One evening you and Devons walk along the beach, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. What's the next move, Captain? He asks, his voice quiet. It's the question you've been avoiding. You could try to return to the life, but with a diminished crew, you'd be an easy target for the Navy. You could try to sail to a place like North Carolina, where some corrupt officials were known to turn a blind eye to pirates for a price, but that's a risky gamble. Or you could try to seek a pardon, if any are still being offered, but that would mean surrendering your ship, your freedom, and the identity you've built for yourself. The golden age is over. The party is ended, and the authorities have come to shut it down. All the great names are gone. Blackbeard is dead. Blackbeard Roberts, who took more than 400 ships, was killed in battle off the coast of Africa. Calico Jack was hanged in Jamaica. You are one of the last of a dying breed. Your world has shrunk from the vast, open ocean to this single, lonely strip of sand. The decision is forced upon you by a sail on the horizon. It's a British Royal Navy frigate, cutting cleanly through the water, its sails bright white against the blue. They are not firing any signals. They are just there, a stark and undeniable message that your isolation is over. Your sanctuary has been discovered. Panic erupts in the camp. The men, weakened by disease and idleness, scramble for their weapons. Their fighting spirit, dormant for so long, flickers back to life. Some shout about making a stand, about dying as free men on the beach. Cobb, your old rival, is one of the loudest, urging the men to fight to the last. But you know it's hopeless. A frigate is a war machine. It has dozens of heavy cannons and a full complement of well-armed, disciplined marines. Your sloop has a handful of guns, and your crew is a shadow of its former self. To fight would be suicide, a pointless, bloody gesture. You stand on the beach and watch the frigate. It anchors just out of your own cannon's range, a clear sign that they are in control. A longboat is lowered and begins to row towards the shore. It's not an attack. It's a negotiation. You walk to the water's edge to meet them, with Evans by your side. The boat carries a young naval officer, his uniform crisp and impossibly clean in this wild place, and a squad of Marines who look at you with a mixture of pity and contempt. The officer informs you that he is acting under the authority of the governor. He knows who you are. He knows about your last prize. He tells you that the age of piracy is over. He then presents you with your final choice, the same choice that has ended the careers of so many of your brethren. Option 1: surrender unconditionally. You and your crew will be taken in chains to be tried. The outcome of such a trial is certain a dance at the end of a rope. Option 2: accept a final offer of the king's pardon. This is unexpected. You thought the time for pardons was long past. The officer explains that the governor is a practical man. He has been authorized to offer clemency one last time to any remaining pirates who turn themselves in. But there are conditions. You must surrender your ship and all your remaining plunder. In exchange, you and your men will be allowed to go free, to integrate back into colonial society as broke but living men. This is the ultimate dilemma. It's a choice between your life and your identity. To accept the pardon is to admit defeat, to renounce everything you have stood for. It is to surrender your freedom, the very thing you went on the account to gain. To die fighting, on the other hand, would be to cement your legacy as a defiant pirate, a man who never bowed. The historical precedents are clear. Charles Vane, a famously unyielding pirate, spat on the offer of a pardon, choosing to fight on until he was eventually captured and hanged. He became a legend of defiance. Benjamin Hornigold, once a mentor to Blackbird, accepted the pardon and went one step further. He became a pirate hunter, using his knowledge to track down his former comrades. He chose life and pragmatism over loyalty and legend. The academic debate over these choices is fascinating. Were the pirates who accepted the pardon traitors to their cause, or were they simply rational actors, making the best choice available in a no-win situation? Some historians, particularly those from a more Marxist perspective, view the pirates who fought to the end as proto-revolutionaries, martyrs for an alternative way of life. Others see them as stubborn fools who couldn't adapt to a changing world. You look at your crew. You see the fear in their eyes. You see the sores on their skin. They are not the fearsome sea robbers of the legends. They are sick, tired, broken men. Cobb and a small handful of others are still shouting about defiance, but you can see that most of the men are just looking at you, waiting for you to tell them what to do. They don't want to die here, on this anonymous beach. They just want to live. A little-known fact about the pirate trials is that they were often a form of political theater. The authorities needed to make an example of the pirates to deter others, but they also needed to show that the system of law and order was triumphant. A mass pardon, in its own way, could serve the same purpose. It demonstrated the Crown's power, the power to give life as well as to take it. You look at Evans, your mate Lot, your partner. You have a shared fortune hidden away, a small nest egg that the Navy doesn't know about. If you live, you can start a new life together, somewhere quiet. If you die here, it all means nothing. You turn to the naval officer. Your voice is steady, but the words taste like ash in your mouth. We accept the terms, you say. A sigh of relief ripples through most of your crew. Cobb spits on the sand in disgust, calling you a coward. But the decision is made. Your life as a pirate is over. You order your men to lay down their arms. As you row out to the frigate, a prisoner on your own ship's longboat, you take one last look at your sloop. The Liberty, it was your home, your kingdom, the vessel of your freedom. Now it's just a piece of evidence. You have chosen life, but you can't help but wonder if, in doing so, you have killed the most important part of yourself. You live on land now. It's a strange, muted existence. You and Devons bought a small, legitimate shipping business in a quiet colonial port. Using the nest egg you managed to hide from the authorities. You are merchants. The irony is not lost on you. You spend your days supervising the loading and unloading of cargo, the very thing you used to interrupt with cannonballs and terror. The world of the land is quiet. The sounds are different. There is no constant creak of timber, no snap of sails, no roar of the wind. There are church bells, the rumble of cartwheels on cobblestones, the polite chatter of townspeople. It feels muffled, unreal. You find yourself walking to the docks at night, just to smell the salt and hear the water lapping against the pilings. It's the only thing that feels familiar. Your identity is gone. You are no longer captain. You are addressed by your given name, the name you haven't heard in years. No one here knows who you were. You are just a quiet man with a limp you can't explain and a haunted look in your eyes. The men who once followed you into the mouth of hell now scatter the winds. Some find work as sailors on honest ships. Some end up as beggars. A few, like Hob, are unable to adapt and are eventually caught and hanged for some petty crime. Your floating nation has dissolved back into the anonymous mass of the working poor from which it came. The historical reality for most pardoned pirates was not a happy retirement. They were skilled sailors, but they were also marked men. They struggled to find decent work, lacking the structure and purpose of the ship. Many fell back into crime or died in poverty. The romantic notion of a pirate burying his treasure and living out his days in luxury was, for almost everyone, a fantasy. You and Devons are the exception. Your Matelotage, the bond forged at sea, is what allows you to survive on land. It transforms from a partnership in crime to a partnership in business. You run the business together. You share your meals in silence. The bond is as strong as ever, but it's a quiet, secret thing now, a relic of a drowned world. One day, a book arrives on a ship from London. It's the talk of the colonies. It's called A General History of the Robberies and Murders of the Most Notorious Pirates. Someone in the tavern has a copy, and you look at it over their shoulder. It's written by a Captain Charles Johnson. You see familiar names: Blackbird, Calico Jack Crackham, Bartholomew Roberts. The book is filled with stories of their exploits, many of them wildly exaggerated. It describes Blackbird as a demon with smoke pouring from his beard. It tells the sensational tale of Bonnie and Mary Red. It turns the brutal, desperate, and often pathetic men you knew into legendary, romantic figures. It creates the myth. Your life, your messy, painful, complicated life, is being turned into an adventure story for the entertainment of people who will never know the truth. And here is where history gets truly strange. To this day, no one knows for sure who Captain Charles Johnson was. The name is almost certainly a pseudonym. For centuries, the leading candidate was Daniel Defoe, the author of Robinson Crusoe. He was a journalist and a novelist who was brilliant at writing convincing, fictionalized true accounts. The academic debate still rages. Was it Defoe? Was it another publisher or writer? Was it, as some have recently argued, a man named Nathaniel Mist, a journalist and former sailor we may never know? The man who created the pirate legend is as much of a mystery as the legends themselves. You read the descriptions and you don't recognize the world they describe. The book talks of buried treasure maps and grand sea battles, but it leaves out the boredom, the disease, the fear, the rot. It leaves out the taste of mercury in your mouth and quiet desperation of a becalmed ship. It turns your brutal reality into a thrilling fantasy. You walk home from the docks one evening and see a group of children playing by the street. They have sticks for swords and a tattered piece of cloth for a flag. One of them, a boy with a smudge of dirt on his cheek, stands on a barrel and shouts orders. "Give em no quarter," he yells, laughing. HES pretending to be a pirate captain. AGS pretending to be you. And in that moment you understand. The man you were is dead. The captain is gone, lost at sea along with your ship, your crew, and your freedom. In his place, a legend has been born. A story for boys to play with, a myth for the world to consume. You survived, but you have become a ghost, haunting the edges of your own story. The story is fading now, the sharp edges of the memories beginning to soften. The clang of cutlasses and the roar of the cannon are growing distant, replaced by a gentle, rhythmic whisper, like waves sighing on a distant shore. You can feel the ship rocking, but it is a slow, soothing motion now, a cradle being pushed by a phantom tide. The faces of the crew, once so vivid, are blurring into soft focus, their sea shanties becoming a low, gentle hum on the edge of hearing. The gold in the hold no longer glitters, it just gives off a soft, warm glow, a dying ember in the darkness of the past. The fear and the adrenaline have ebbed away, leaving only a deep and profound calm, the kind of quiet that follows a long and terrible storm. You are drifting now, no longer a captain in command, but a passenger on a voyage into slumber. The salt spray on your face is just a cool mist, and the endless blue of the ocean is melting into the deep, peaceful indigo of a dream. Let the current take you. There are no more sails to set, no more courses to chart. There is only the gentle, silent drift into the quiet harbor of the night. The end of the article. Good night.